Hey folks, this is just a quick note to let you know that because there was some problems with the lav mics on this seminar, I've set the sound very high, so if you've got headphones in, be careful.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are live, so I had better start saying words that are of use to you and the people watching. Now, which word should I choose? Okay, so I offered you an example before, and I'm moving towards a sort of an open source experiment with you here. I offered you a real world example of an ex-girlfriend, perhaps we've identified she's seems to be borderline, seems to be histrionic, and I am trying to get money back that is owed to me. And that's the last example I gave to you. Some of the questions that would need to be asked in a situation like this would be, what is the real world situation of the person? Do they have money? If I'm going to try to get money owed back from someone who simply, realistically, doesn't have it, isn't going to have it, and there's just no point, aside from them trying to rob a bank or something, then there are certain situations that I recommend you don't waste your time with. Like I said to this lady before, do you have a hook? Do you have any hook whatsoever? No. Okay. It's very hard to apply any kind of psychological technique to somebody if there's no hook whatsoever, if they're just not interested at all. Would appealing to a higher authority help? Would fear of public shaming help? You know, it doesn't sound very nice, but this works. The last few times I've had problems with airlines losing luggage. It's happened to me 3 times in the last 12 months. And somebody told me this technique, that apparently they're very frightened of social media shaming. And I went, oh, they're not asked. They're huge corporations. They respond very quickly. You send them an email, you get nothing. You go straight to their Facebook page or their Twitter, and they respond straight away, and they will actually do something about it. This is an example of real-world leverage that takes me out of my internalized sort of half-mythological fantasy zone into, okay, what is going to have an impact in the real world? Will it work for them? So yes, in this case, appealing to a higher authority, the court of public opinion, and fear of public shaming, both worked. Would being kind and friendly engender a better response than being belligerent and threatening in accordance with your intent and objectives? You owe me money, I want it back. Is fear of public shaming going to make you double down and dig our heels even harder? Or is there something else I can do whereby I can come to some sort of reasonable compromise? You may have noticed, any of you who have ever been in debt, I'm sure nobody in this room ever has, but the debt collection agencies, the phone calls, the texts, and the letters that they send you are very well-designed exercises in manipulation. They actually have psychologists who come in, they'll tell them where to put the exclamation mark, which words to capitalize, to make you feel as though now is the time, urgently, to pay. Here, please. You don't need to do any of that. But, I mean, please do pay your debts, obviously. Sign that off. But I used to work for an American credit card company for a couple of years, and I went deep into the laws on debt collection. It's very, very, very hard to force people to give money back, and, you know, please pay your debts. My point there was that if you study these things, there are emotional manipulation and the modeling of emotional manipulation, psychological manipulation is all around you. Marketing campaigns, advertising, debt collection, all of it has these triggers, these rewards and threats implicit in them. You see an advert where they're trying to sell ice cream, and it's just an ice cream thing, and all of a sudden a girl is next to it looking like she's about to perform fellatio. The potential, I mean, it's like it's a fucking ice cream, calm down. The potential reward that is supposed to be there is that eating the ice cream is going to be so pleasurable it will be like sex. The implicit, nonsensical message that is there is eating the ice cream makes you look sexy, and you want to be sexy like this girl, right? The threat there is if you don't eat the ice cream, then no oral sex for you. And so there is always threat and reward. There's pain and pleasure, and your buttons are being pushed all the time. It's a good thing to become aware of this just as a human being in the world, so that you're less likely to be manipulated against your will. A narcissistic psychopath, oh, here's the second example. A narcissistic psychopath has taken power in the Oval Office in your life and is wreaking havoc You need to assess their strengths and their weaknesses. You need to assess the limitations of their power on you, and you need to make an accurate assessment. We're leading now to my open format experiment here. You then need to assess your own strengths and weaknesses. What can you do? What are you vulnerable to having done to having things done to you? Scan them, learn them, build rapport, be dispassionate, scan and learn that individual as a system, as a program that is running based on certain key principles with vulnerabilities, desires, and drives. Discover their worldview and enter that worldview. Do not impose your worldview. This is terrible psychology. Therapists are trained not to do that, and so are advertisers. Just saying. Hashtag just saying. You'd never force your worldview on a client in the same way you'd never force your worldview on the person you're selling something to. You enter their world. You enter their world. You must do this. In the world of sales, they will say, enter the conversation the client is already having inside their head and solve the problem for them. This is good psychology. This is good manipulative psychology. Scan them, learn them, build rapport, find out their hopes and dreams, find out their fears and anxieties. Their hopes and dreams is the pleasure that they're moving towards. Their fears and anxieties are the pain that they're moving away from. Pain, pleasure. So you need to understand these so that you can manipulate them. When other people observe the interactions with this narcissistic psychopath, when other people are manipulating them and motivating them, how do they do it? Because you can observe in the human ecosystem that other people are manipulating them and observe their positions. What is their power position in relation to this authority figure? Will he listen to his grandchildren where he won't listen to his political advisors or his children? Ah, he does. That's interesting. Why is he doing that? Because he's a hyper-sentimentalizing psychopath who thinks if somebody's younger than him, then they're lower than him, and he can tolerate that power structure. He can't tolerate somebody coming in with a horizontal power structure. That sets him off time and again. We've seen that time and again. If you come to him as an equal and say, listen mate, this is what we need to do, bad response. If you come fawning and submissive from below, good response. That's the kind of conversation he can endure. How would I then do it? Well, then I wouldn't come and say, bump him on the shoulder and go, hey mate, this is what we better do now, because if you don't, you're going to be in trouble. That's going to set him off. I would need to come in as a child, from a childlike position of fawning innocence and appeal to his hypersentimentality. Hypersentimentality is very, very common in this type. Okay, the questions I've been asking you about making an assessment of people, how many of you would struggle to do this realistically in your scenario? Yes, and a few more than that, I would think. If you find that your thinking on the issue is unclear or is giving you brain fog, is anybody getting brain fog from the kind of things I've been suggesting? Yeah. This is, don't worry about it. My personal hypothesis is this shows that the emotional flashbacks are strong. Are you all aware of what emotional flashbacks are? Okay, so it's a traumatic response. You're still cycling through a traumatic response that's making you emotional. So, but if you've lived with it for long enough, you won't feel it. You can see it from the outside, it's observable, but you would just think, no, this is just me having a normal day. And I would say, no, there's a chain of emotional flashbacks that some of you have already gone through 6 or 7 of them, but it's so cyclical, you're experiencing it as, oh, this is the point of the day where I feel really ashamed. This is the point of the day where I feel slightly depressed and full of despair. Ha-ha! And then you just move on. So you're actually cycling through emotional flashbacks. You've got to clear the emotional flashbacks or at least reduce them, and you need to clear and heal the trauma bond before you move forward. I've had people come to me in the breaks and say, what do I do with this, that, and the other thing, and the specificity of this and that? The emotional flashbacks are still too strong. You're still flashbacking. And it's that person particularly is triggering for you and making you even worse. So I would say, I'm going to teach you something, and you're going to make an assessment of the strengths and weaknesses of Donald Trump, but you're still in love with Donald Trump. Sorry, I nearly threw up. Strong physiological response. But because you still love him, you admire him, you think he's going to save you, save the nation, he's the new God. If I say to you, assess his strengths and weaknesses, anyone else you could have done it for. Anyone else. I said, yes, this, that, the other. I can absolutely know that this is what they want and this is what they don't want. And I say, now apply that to him. Brain fog. Brain fog. So people come to ask me questions, And I'll say, what's your question? And they'll go, well, on Tuesday, my pet hamster died, and then my mother said this. And I'm like, what's your question? And that can induce an emotional flashback. Or if I say to you, who is it you're trying to manipulate and what's your objective? The wheel starts spinning. That's a trauma response. That's a freeze response to a traumatic situation that's not external. Because the person, Donald Trump, isn't here. But I keep invoking him. And so we can all imagine him, and then we experience it as real. This is what we're carrying around. This is why my overall message to you for the day is that the problems actually are internal, not external, even though your brain is saying it's all out there. Will you leverage them with fear of negative consequence and exposure, or will you leverage them with their desire to fulfill their fantasies or their false self? You really only have two choices. You can either threaten, or you can leverage them with a desire to fulfill their fantasies. In the case of the gentleman that I have mentioned 5 times and will not invoke again, every time they do this, it's a very strongly negative response. I might write to his aides at the Oval Office and say, stop doing that. You're not going to get what you want from him like this. He's shown you time and again. If you say, do this or else, because there are laws, it will be, fuck you, I'll show you the law. But if it's gentle and kind, and isn't this kind of what you said that you wanted to do? My God, could you imagine how much they're going to love you, as they should love you? If they can truly see who you are, then they will love you even more, because you're the hugest, bestest thing ever, right? Huge and tremendous. That way, you can get them to do what you want. That would be effective. The third option, beyond just pain and pleasure, and this is for black belts only, so you would have had to have cleared your trauma bond with this person completely, and your emotional flashbacks would have to be reduced to a very, very low level. Very, very low level. The inception methodology takes a hugely high level of rapport. This person had better trust you and value you. Sam gave you the method before of alternating different sources of supply, hitting them from multiple angles, addicting them to you, being a good quality source of supply. You've been taught how to do that by Sam. Become the best source of secondary supply that you can. Achieve that first, and then this method will work. You'll need trust, intimacy, and time. Because in this scenario, you will not just addict them to you, you will also do what Sam suggested, which is condition them. Condition them. The same way that you would a pet, that you want to behave a certain way at dinner time or on walks. It takes time. It's a biological process where you're laying down new neural pathways. If you do this, you get a reward. If you do this, you get a punishment and a negative consequence. Condition them. That will take time plus intimacy plus your intent and skill. And your skill level had better be very, very high. Your level of dispassion had better match or exceed theirs. As Sam said to you, you will play the game with them. You will, even if you don't want to. You will learn the narcissistic strategies. You will learn the psychopathic strategies if you are going to manipulate them. Otherwise, you should give up. So you're going to have to do things that you wouldn't normally do and act in ways that you wouldn't normally like. But you're going to have to do it. So your level of dispassion, a flat level of effect, needs to be very, very high, if not exceeding theirs. And in order for that to happen, you would need to be totally healed of the trauma bond. Having established rapport covertly, you would then, Inception, just like in the film, Inception was a good movie from a psychological point of view. We do this kind of thing all the time. Unfortunately, there was so much going on in that film that it took me 3 goes to figure out what the main idea of the film was. And the main idea of the film, I think, is just that a husband who worked in the field of psychological manipulation manipulated his wife to do a good thing, but she hyper-repeated the good thing to a bad end. He convinced her, in order to free her from a fantasy, that the only way out was death. And she came out of the fantasy into the real world, and she just kept on going with the conditioning. The only way out is death. The only way out. And he was saying, you're out now. No, I'm not. I'm still in it. That's Inception. That was the message of Inception. So you're actually going to place the idea in their head as though it were their idea. Sorry, just not right. Up in Liverpool, you call tissue snotties. I'm going to teach you all the best habits. Myself and Sam, we've been doing interviews and documentaries and stuff for 6 days now. So there's you know, your throat goes and your nose goes and stuff. So you would place the idea in their head, as was done in the film. You would convince them slowly and gently over time that this is the thing to do. You can do this overtly, you can do this covertly, you can study things like covert hypnosis and embedded language patterns from fields like hypnosis, neurolinguistic programming, that kind of thing, if you really wanted to go deep on it. But you don't need to. Don't complexify that which can be rendered simple. You want to put an idea in somebody's head, just gently present it to them over and over again over time. When it's done in neurolinguistic programming or in hypnosis, the only difference, the fancy version, is you do it through metaphor. You would try and convince the certain gentleman that actually building a physical wall doesn't make anybody any flipping safer, and only a moron would think that it would. See, I mentioned dispassion. I just failed my own. But do it properly. Just do as I say, not what I do. If you had a problem with answering some of these questions in terms of threat assessment or SWOT analysis, then you need to realize that there is an issue there that's pre-existing that must be resolved first. Realize that your emotional attachment, the trauma bond to this person, is damaging your ability to think, in a cool, calm, detached way, which would be necessary in order for you to inflict the correct strategies. Realize that you may not be capable of fulfilling your intent without healing a little bit more first. How many of you think that you probably need to heal first before putting some of these things into practice? Most of you, I think, would need to heal first before even attempting any of this. Only because, again, if it was a military operation, and I say, I don't know, like it's a rescue operation, and you go, okay, we need to go there, and we need to rescue those prisoners of war, your whole assessment of where there is will be off. How many people are there is off. How many threats are there? It's off. There are so many ways it can go wrong when you're emotionally dysregulated that it's mind-boggling. And the simple reason is my capacity to perceive reality with Zen-like precision is ruined by emotional dysregulation. Being emotionally dysregulated and having emotional flashbacks actually warps perception. I can't go so far as to say as at the level of hallucinations, but nearly. You might perceive things as being there that are not there, and there are things there that you need to see that you will not see. They'll be in blind spots. So these are important. I'm trying to convince you that you need to make sure you have healed first. Next slide. An interesting variation of the techniques I've given you that would give you more scope for understanding the enemy's position at a nuanced internal level is look at your options for manipulation through the 4 Fs. Most of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with the 4 F trauma responses, which are fight, fawn, freeze, or flight. These are our biological imperatives to protect ourselves at the crudest, survival-based, most primal levels. So, through the 4 Fs, you can fight, you can make threats, you can threaten legal action, exposure, public shaming. Fawning would be flattery, trickery, or negotiation. If you do this, I will grant you that thing that you said that you wanted. Freeze is total shutdown of all communication, or some variation of this. The Sam's no contact rule is one of these things that seems to cause confusion in people. It's either no contact, purely, canonical no contact means no contact, but sometimes just diminished contact can have an effect as well. And the way I usually describe this would be, if you have a phone call, shrink it. If you send a text, send less words. If you need to meet them face to face to exchange the children while snipers are pointing everywhere, then do that rapidly and offer as little information as you can. Any and all information that you offer can and will be used against you later. So offer as little information as you can. Offer as little emotion as you can. Flight is a withdrawal from the scenario or a threat of withdrawal from the scenario or some variation of that. Nothing is better than the other. It either works to fulfill your objectives or it does not. Don't start preferring different methodologies. Keep yourself dispassionate, keep yourself pulled out of it. It should be the way it would be done at a military level and the way it's taught in martial arts and combatives. You don't do your best move, you do the enemy's worst move. I should have written that as a slide. Do what is worst for them, not what is best for you. So you may have a particular thing that you're good at. And you might go, oh, well, I've done legal action before. I know, I'll do that again because I know what I'm doing. If that's not the thing that's going to work for them, don't do that. Do their worst move. I'm pretty sure there was a Russian chess champion who said that first. I can't remember the guy's name. But that was his advice. Don't do your best strategy. Do the opponent's worst strategy. Do the thing that is going to upset or throw them off balance the most. Next slide, please. Okay, these are my general tips and principles for manipulating the psychopath. Okay, number one. They're written like they're equally weighted, but they're not equally weighted. Number one is huge, and if you're writing notes, please take note. Abandon your usual way of interacting with people. Let it go. Let go of what you usually do. Let go of your ego. Let go of your personality. Let go of your narrative. Let go of your story. If this were a darker seminar, I would say let go of your moral code. But I don't think that's necessary. And if we start going down that road, what's the difference between us and them? I mean, but if there was military, they would tell you, abandon your moral code. It's whatever, you do whatever you can to defeat the enemy. For the purposes of this seminar, you don't go that far because you're just as bad as they are from a value judgment perspective. But you must come back to this principle. Abandon your usual way of getting the job done. Abandon it. So I find myself in coaching sessions with people, and they'll say, I want to do this, I want to get this result, I want to see more of my kids, I want to get this, whatever. And I'll constantly be saying to them, you're trying to bring your morality, you're trying to bring your personality, who you are, to this, to show them you're a better person. Give up. They don't care. They don't care how earnest you are. They don't care how sincere you are. They don't care you're talking to them in another language about another subject that bores them. But the only reason they'll talk to you about it is because they know that it motivates you. So by doing that, you're giving them more ammunition. Do you understand? When you talk love, they'll talk love to you, not because it matters to them, but because it matters to you. And they'll have long conversations about love with you, and they'll just suck it all up and go, great, give me all the ammunition I need to destroy you with later. When you talk morality and they listen, they're not talking because morality matters to them, they're talking because it matters to you. And you're their primary target. They're studying you. And you're going, oh, we're having a nice conversation and we agree about values and morality and virtue. It's like, no. One person is talking, one person is listening. That's all that's happening there. It's a one-way street. They'll just feed back what you want to hear. They're very good at that. And you'll be like, my God, your values match mine. Yeah, well, you're talking to a fucking chameleon. Of course, the value is bouncing it right back to you. So abandon your usual way of interacting and abandon your usual way of trying to get things done. It's actually going to hurt you because they've already mapped that. Anything that you do that's pre-mapped, they can beat you on. Don't panic. What's the song though? What are we? You can't just have a ringtone like a normal person. What's the song? You don't even know, it's your phone.
I don't know, it's just a cool ringtone.
Like a whole symphony going on there. Okay. Part of this, like I say, it's not an equally weighted list. Part of this, an integral part of this, is to beware of and heal your typical trauma response. Are you all moderately aware of your typical trauma response? It's a good thing to figure out. It's a good thing to figure out your primary and secondary trauma responses. If you respond to stress with aggression, it's probably fight. If you respond by fawning or trying to find some way to negotiate, that's fawn. If you dissociate and disappear into your imagination, that's freezing. If you want to fucking run away, guess what that is? It's flight. Pretty simple, eh? So you'll have a number one way of responding to trauma and then a secondary way. We all do all of them, by the way. Everybody does every single trauma response. It's useful to know, like for me, I'm a fight, fawn responder. And Pete Walker, clever chap that he is, when he figured out what people's primary and secondary trauma responses were, he started to correlate those to different personality disorders. Guess what fight fawn is? Narcissism. It's narcissism. If you look at like public speakers, stand-up comedians, and a lot of psychologists, they have a primary fight fawn response. Why? Because I need to fawn to manipulate a certain response from you, and I need to fight because it needs to be asserted with aggression. Comedy, stand-up comedy is, if you think about it from a certain perspective, it's kind of aggressive. I'm making you laugh. I'm not asking you to laugh. I'm making you laugh. So the fight. So learning what if you're a freeze flight type or whatever it is, it's really useful data for you just in your personal development anyway. But you must heal it for when you're trying to apply the techniques I've given you earlier. Got to deal with your emotional flashbacks to a high level. You must heal the trauma bond first. There's a load of writing here that's really important, and it's totally fucking illegible. How does that make you feel? Watch out for common people-pleasing, fawning, or codependent traits that will hurt your efforts. So as you're moving forward with trying to make an assessment and implement a strategy, please be on your guard in yourself for naivety, hyper-conscientiousness, which means you're taking care of everybody else's problems, and if a mistake is, if he bumps his car over there, I say sorry, because, you know, that's hyper-conscientiousness. I could have done something. Earnestness. Earnestness was not in the original list of people-pleasing, but I've noticed over time that people who have the strong people-pleasing response, very honest, very earnest, very sincere. You don't have to give that much away. Neurotypical people don't. You don't realize that, like, your level of givingness is up here, but people who don't suffer this, they don't do that. It's an unboundaried way of communicating. Feeling guilty, trying to fix everything, taking responsibility for everything, being overly involved, and playing the savior. You're not going to manipulate a psychopath and save them. You're not going to manipulate a psychopath and save your relationship. Sorry, if that's what you came for. Can't. Doesn't happen. Won't happen. Cannot work that way. And if you're playing a role neurotically, that's where things will go wrong and you'll screw up. I think that's the last slide. It is. Excellent. Then I can hand over to Mr. Sam.
I think my last segment is about narcissists in the workplace and how to cope and manipulate with them. You remember? Secondary source of supply? Wives? Same relationship exists between employees and bosses, narcissistic bosses, or narcissistic owners of companies, company owners, entrepreneurs, and so on. The role of the employees is to record the boss's moments of glory, glamour, and success, and to play these moments back to him or her when supply is deficient or missing. So obviously, if you are an employee of a narcissist, what you would do on a regular basis after the one coffee is remind the narcissist of a moment of success, some accomplishment, but not any every accomplishment is incomparable. Every success is unprecedented. Narcissists thrive on superlatives. It's not enough to succeed. You must succeed in a way that no one had ever succeeded before. It's not enough to accomplish, but your accomplishment must be unique, unprecedented, and unheralded. So mind your language. Don't be mundane, don't be banal, don't be pedestrian, because the narcissist is not. The narcissist is a spectacle, a walking, talking spectacle. There's no one there. There's absolutely no one inside. I'm a simulation, in the purest sense of the word. I may look as though I'm human. I may appear to be human. I may give all the cues, because I have a substantial database as to how you lot behave. So I can imitate you. And sometimes successfully. I can give you right now 10 minutes of extreme empathy, or extreme evil, or extreme anything. But remember, I am a spectacle. You go to the theater, how do you show your appreciation? You clap, you applaud. So that's a theater production. Your narcissistic boss or colleague or superior or superintendent or whatever is a theater production. You must show your appreciation the way you would in a theater. You must buy a ticket. That's the first thing. Second thing, the narcissistic boss expects from you mirroring, not autonomy. If he wants your opinion, he will give it to you. So you're not supposed to be independent. You're not supposed to show any sign of independence. Remember, Narcissists have no external objects. They have only internal objects. There's nothing more unsettling than an internal object that acquires external autonomy. Nothing more frightening. I mean, imagine your refrigerator suddenly talking to you, or your television set. These are... Why are you so serious? Internal objects, and all of your internal objects, are not supposed to have an external existence. It's very unsettling. So you're supposed to mirror. Mirror. The narcissist is happy, you're happy. Narcissist is sad, you're sad. He is elated for some accomplishment, you emphasize the accomplishment. He doubts someone, you doubt with him. You're yes-sayers, not naysayers. You're ass-lickers, you're followers and fans. You're mere reflections and extensions, etc., etc. Now you could say, why would I work for a boss like this? Because most bosses are like this. No, I'm kidding. But why would I work for a boss like this? Well, sometimes you can't simply pack up and leave. In marriages as well as in workplaces. You can't just pack up and find another job. It's not that easy. Definitely not after 2008. So sometimes you're stuck. For various reasons. You have tenure at the university, or you have, you're stuck. You can't leave. Well, if you're stuck and can't leave, you'd better follow my advice. Because otherwise, the alternative is inferno embodied. Narcissistic boss or colleague will make your life unmitigated hell. Day in and day out. Sometimes during the night as well. They are stalkers. They know no boundaries. So, mirror. Do not display your independence and autonomy. No one is asking for your opinion. No one is asking for your experience. No one is interested in anything you have to say or do. You're there to mirror, to amplify. Next thing is, narcissists don't have friends because to be a friend, you need an equal. Narcissists have no equals. They are superior to everyone, to absolutely everyone. Perhaps not hierarchically. So the narcissist would recognize that the aforementioned President of the United States is superior to him hierarchically. But I'm not talking about hierarchy. I'm talking about emotions and assumptions about the world. So the narcissist assumes that he is the most superior being ever to have been created. And so no one can be his equal. Because no one can be his equal, no one can be his friend. Do not try to be the narcissist's friend. Do not try to be the narcissist's friend. Do not attempt to create intimacy, even implied. It will backfire big time. You will be punished severely. No good deed goes unpunished, trust me. You will be punished severely. Keep your distance, respectful distance. Show your obeisance. It's a feudal system. What do you think? Where do you think you are? Democracy. It's a feudal system. He owns you because he pays you. In the narcissist world, to pay is to own. To be weak is to be stupid. To be stupid is to be dead. To love is to be stupid. To love is to be dead. The only motivator is fear. And you should dole it out generously. Signed, Stalin. Never ever disagree with the narcissist. Never criticize the narcissist. But not for the reason you think. It's true that disagreement and criticism is narcissistic injury. But narcissistic injury creates a temper tantrum. Temper tantrum, a little rage, it passes. Narcissists are very good at ameliorating and solving narcissistic injuries because they are intolerable. Narcissists cannot tolerate narcissistic injuries, so he's very good at kind of shoving it under the carpet, a process that Sigmund Freud called repression. Narcissists are very good at repressing narcissistic injuries. But if you criticize and disagree, you prove that you exist. You prove that you're autonomous. You demonstrate your autonomy or your independence. You challenge the inner object. You challenge the constancy, the permanence of the inner object. If there's anything in the narcissist world that is utterly critical, is inner object permanence or inner object constancy as opposed to external object constancy. Healthy people have external object constancy. In other words, if your husband leaves for work, you expect him to return. You don't assume that he had vanished forever. No such luck. So this is called external object consciousness. And most healthy people have that. Narcissists strive to make, because they don't have external objects, they strive to maintain an ecosphere of internal objects and internal object permanence. They must be sure that these internal objects will be there unchanged. Unchanged. They must not be abandoned by the internal objects. Any change in the internal object is perceived as abandonment and provokes abandonment anxiety. So very strangely, you could be behaving exactly the same. But I don't know, in the morning you said, well, I disagree with you about Trump. He's a wonderful man. That would be enough to create a change, a discrepancy in the inner object and a feeling of abandonment. Narcissists will catastrophize what you said. Will catastrophize it. He will escalate it. You disagreed about Trump, but in his mind you're leaving him for another man, for example. And the escalation is immediate. It's the need to maintain inner object consciousness is very critical. Because a narcissist is the loneliest person on earth. No one is remotely as lonely as a narcissist. The last remaining Tibetan monk in a monastery in Shangri-La is far less lonely than the average narcissist. Not to mention the not average narcissist. Far less lonely. Why? Because where a person should have been, there is a void, an emptiness. That's common to borderline, by the way. Common also to borderline personality disorder. Where a person should have been, there is a void, and this void is populated by avatars, by icons, by apparitions, by ghosts. Narcissist is a ghost land. There are ghosts there. And narcissist cannot reach out. He's dying to reach out, but he cannot reach out because he has no external object. So he cannot reach out. He can only talk to himself. It's the ultimate existential loneliness. You cannot imagine. So he needs to maintain these internal objects, because otherwise the alternative is psychosis. Indeed, what happens in psychosis is confusion between internal objects and external objects. That is psychosis. You hear a voice. You hear a voice telling you whatever it's telling you. This voice is actually inside you. But you confuse this voice. You think it's not internal, you think it's external. That is psychosis. So if a narcissist fails to maintain an inner object permanence, if some of the objects begin to misbehave, to show autonomy, to show independence, the narcissist can go psychotic. Can go psychotic on you. If you observed, filmed, taped narcissistic rage attacks, they contain pronounced psychotic elements. For example, the narcissist hears things, claims to have heard things that you have said, which you have never said. So, but you said it, but you didn't say it. It's an inner voice. He's confusing inner voice with external.
Is he pretending?
No, he's not pretending.
Oh, okay.
It's all true. So he would tell you, but you said it. Or he would tell you, I would never do a thing like this. He would do something, and he would tell, a minute later, he would tell, I would never do a thing like this. It's because internal and external get blurred. The minute you show the narcissist that you're autonomous and independent, you are not only threatening his ego. It's not only a narcissistic injury. You are threatening the total balance of his personality. You are driving him to madness, to insanity. That's why he's so protective and so defensive of the... Next thing is narcissists need nothing. Why they need nothing? Because they're God. God doesn't need anything. Well, New Testament God. Old Testament God needs you to worship him. If you don't worship him, he will strike you with the lightning and kill you. Which sounds a lot narcissistic to me. But narcissism is God. Is godlike. Narcissism generally, I present narcissism, pathological narcissism, as a form of private religion. Private religion with one adherent, with one believer, where the narcissist has a God called the false self, and he worships this God. He worships this God, and he makes sacrifices to this Moloch, to this God. He's sacrificing his true self. So he's coming to like Aztec, like some kind of Aztec. He's coming to this God, to the false self, and saying, protect me, defend me, help me, aggrandize me. In return, I will kill myself. I will sacrifice myself on your altar. It's a private religion, absolutely. And because it's a private religion, and because the narcissist does not exist, he has been replaced by the false self. And the false self is godlike. The false self needs nothing. That's not me. That's Benedict Spinoza, Baruch Spinoza. Spinoza said, if there is a God, there is can be nothing outside it. And therefore, he would never need anything. So, following on Spinoza's footsteps, I can say the same. Because the narcissist needs nothing, any advice you try to give the narcissist is a challenge to his grandiosity, to his omnipotence. Advice. If you give an advice to a normal person, to a healthy person, it would be appreciated. They would be grateful. They say, thank you very much. It's very kind of you. Thank you for your concern. The narcissist would rage. Because if you think he needs advice, you're implying that he is imperfect, that he is not godlike, that he is not omniscient and omnipotent. So he doesn't need your advice. Giving advice is a bad idea in the workplace. He also does not need your help, ever. You can see the narcissist falling off the stairs, which is the benign scenario, and if you try to help him, he will rage at you. Narcissists never ask for directions in a foreign city. They never need help, ever. Because God doesn't need help. To ask for help, let alone to offer help, is to imply that the narcissist is less than perfect, less than omniscient, less than omnipotent, less than God. A challenge. It's narcissistic injury on the highest possible level. But more than that, it's a challenge to the whole hyperstructure, to the whole theory of the narcissist about himself. Challenge to his grandiosity. So never offer help. And never give advice. Next thing is that in the workplace, the narcissist idealizes, devalues, and discards exactly like in personal relationships. Exactly as he would idealize, devalue, and discard his wife, he would idealize, devalue, and discard employees. So it's a Russian roulette. Today you are the narcissist's favorite. Tomorrow you did something you don't even know what you did. Maybe you offered him coffee. Would you like coffee? I'm kidding you not. Would you like coffee? It presumes that you know what the narcissist needs better than him. It's a challenge. So, you don't know what you did. I don't know, you said, do you want coffee? Enough. You lost your favorite status. Status of favorite. And you are devalued, discarded, and he has a new employee as the pet, as the new pet. So, it's a carousel. It's a Russian roulette. You are today the boss's favorite, tomorrow the most hated man in the office. And he would gang on you. He would create gangs to attack you, to suppress you, because the devaluation must be visible, must be public. Yes, it's like the auto da fe in the Inquisition when they were burning heretics. They weren't burning them in basements. They were burning them in the public square for everyone to see. So the narcissistic boss will burn you on the stake in public for everyone to see. Don't dare to offer me coffee anymore. I drink tea. Okay. Next thing is that never remind the narcissistic boss or colleague, goes for colleagues as well, never remind the narcissistic co-worker of reality. Narcissists hate reality. Why they hate reality? Because their inflated, grandiose self-image is not realistic. And reality keeps offering countervailing information, keeps challenging the narcissist's view of himself as omnipotent, omniscient, perfect, and so on and so forth. So anytime you remind the narcissist of reality, you are challenging him. So never bring news from the outside into the office. Never talk about facts. Never compare. Shut up, simply. It's the main management technique with a narcissist. Simply shut up. If he wants you to talk, he will inform you. He will also tell you what to say. That's it. It's extremely simple, by the way. I can summarize all this. Shut up and wait for instructions. Right? You too. Next thing is that narcissists have alloplastic defenses. So alloplastic defenses and autoplastic defenses. Alloplastic defense is blaming everything on others. on your co-workers, on the government, on your wife, well, in the case of a wife maybe, but on your wife, on the, others are guilty. There's an external locus of control. That's the irony with narcissists, by the way. They are godlike, but they have an external locus of control. They keep complaining that their lives are determined by the outside. Narcissists are the greatest conspiracy theories. But it's ironic. It creates dissonance. If I'm God, but my existence is determined from the outside, it's a conflict. If I'm God, but I need other people to regulate my sense of self-worth, it's a conflict. If I'm God, but I'm dependent on other people for narcissistic supply, it's a conflict. Narcissism is the art of irreconcilable differences. It's the art of the impossible. It's putting together, it's contradiction embodied, reified. So the narcissist is a broken man on multiple levels. Parts of him are fighting parts of this. The right shoulder needs narcissistic supply, and the left shoulder says, are you crazy? I'm God, I don't need anyone. And they're fighting. In my case, it's reversed, by the way. This shoulder is... So, alloplastic defenses, external locus of control, blaming others also. So you have a narcissistic boss. If there's something goes well, it's his credit. Something goes bad, it's your fault. Always. Always. If you do hear a compliment, it's an aggrandizing compliment. I taught you well. I taught you well. Well done. Right? So, alloplastic defenses and external locus of control. Next thing is guilt tripping. You see the connections, yes? Guilt tripping, narcissistic parents, idealization, devaluation, relationships. Narcissists are very basic machines. They use the same techniques, same strategies, same psychodynamic processes everywhere. In the workplace, in a restaurant, so a narcissist would go to a restaurant. He would treat the waiter with the same emotional intensity that he would treat his intimate partner. He would shout at the waiter. He would go into matches of, he would argue, he would look at him, he's so exercised. It's as though, the waiter is one of the most important figures in his life. Because narcissism is total. There are no gradations. It's all or nothing. It's essentially what we call a splitting defense. It's an all or nothing state. It involves dichotomous thinking. Black-white, bad-good. It involves splitting. He's totally bad, she's totally good. So it's a binary state. Narcissists, exactly like Richard Grannon said, are like machines. They're like computers. 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. Everything is binary. So the same intensity, everything is the same all the time. So guilt tripping. Narcissist would guilt trip, narcissistic boss or co-worker would guilt trip his underlings, employees, suppliers, everyone in touch. He would guilt trip them. So he would keep meticulous records of every fuck up. You were supposed to deliver the furniture at 3 o'clock, you delivered it at 4. And he will mention it and harp on it. Great guilt. I read your Excel presentation, I looked at your Excel presentations, you forgot item 273. He would emphasize failures, defeats, defects, fuck-ups. That would be his locus, his focus. And he would guilt trip you into trying to fix it somehow. And it's never good enough, and so on and so forth. And finally, narcissistic bosses and co-workers in the workplace are passive-aggressive. They're negativistic. They feel that they are subject to injustice. They're not properly treated. They feel entitled. They feel discriminated against. They feel that they have no legitimate outlet for their rage or for their indignancy. They feel indignant. They should have treated me better. I invented this. It's my work. They took the credit for it. No one understands me. My boss is jealous of me. They are too stupid to realize what a genius I am. Which in my case is true. And so on. So the passive aggression. All narcissists are passive aggressive in the workplace. And passive aggressive people become bullies. So most narcissists in the workplace are bullies. They bully people via a mechanism called intermittent reinforcement. Hot and cold, approach avoidance. You're my friend, I hate you. This kind of thing. So this is This is what we call approach avoidance repetition compulsion. So these are the mechanisms of passive aggression. Passive aggression is notoriously difficult to cope with. Very difficult, because everything is underhanded. Everything is covert. Everything is behind the scenes. And many covert narcissists actually are passive aggressive. But it's extremely difficult. It's even, I would say, easier to manipulate narcissists and psychopaths than passive aggressives. The passive aggressive needs to maintain his inner balance, his inner homeostasis and equilibrium, needs to believe firmly that the world is against him, that he's discriminated against, misunderstood, that everyone around him, he needs it. The narcissist can switch, can fluctuate. Narcissists can believe that for example, narcissists sometimes need to idealize people. So the narcissist actually can tell you, wow, you're a genius. Why you're a genius? Because you are giving me compliments, you must be a genius. Only a genius would realize that I'm a genius. Yeah? So sometimes narcissists actually idealize people. They're like giving them compliments, not the passive aggressive. The passive aggressive is forever negative. That's why we call it negativistic personality disorder. The passive aggressive is always discriminated against, always misunderstood, people always are stupid, people are always envious. It's total darkness, gloom and doom, like my hotel room. So this is...
I booked for you.
I can forgive many things, Richard, but not the hotels that you're booking. This I can never forgive. So this is, in a nutshell, the workplace environment which involves narcissists and psychopaths. Questions or?
Yes, they may.
Okay. You may.
You may.
You may.
Bet you.
Of course, ask me only questions that show me in a good light.
Yes, sir.
Start with your presentation was amazing. Presentation was amazing.
It was all right.
Damned with faint praise.
Start with fake praise. Yeah.
If a psychopath
You have to speak up a little bit.
if a psychopath experiences narcissistic rage, and to prevent acting out that rage on others, they take it out on themselves in a physical way, is that considered self-harm?
No, I think you're confusing at least nine concepts, which is not easy to do. First of all, psychopaths never experience narcissistic rage. Psychopaths experience rage. It's not narcissistic. Psychopaths actually use rage to regulate and manipulate their human environment. They use rage to affect you, to manipulate you, to obtain goals. It's sometimes goal-oriented rage, and sometimes it is rage that is intended to create a general atmosphere of intimidation where the psychopath can... But we'll talk about it because Richard and I, if he survives, I'm not beginning to think that maybe I'll be alone, Richard and I will discuss this in the dialogue. In the dialogue we have a section, what are the differences between narcissists and psychopaths? Self-harm has nothing to do either with narcissism or with psychopathy. Self-harm or self-mutilation is an independent mental health phenomenon, actually much more associated with borderline personality disorder rather than the other two. And self-harm is something else. Self-harm is simply a result of emotional dysregulation. The borderline, and not only borderline, there are several. The borderline, for example, patient, she's unable to regulate her emotions. So they go up and down, and she feels out of control completely. But there are very long periods where actually she has no access to her emotions, so she feels dead. She feels dead, and this is called in the literature the borderline emptiness, or the borderline void. In order to feel alive again, she cuts, or she burns herself or something. That simply brings her back to life. The jolt brings her back to life. And then it's like rebooting the machine, like restarting. And then she restarts. And emotional regulation is reestablished for a while. Depending on the person, it can be 1 day, 1 month, until the next time. And then she again. So self-harm and self-mutilation are compulsive actions intended essentially to reboot or restart emotional regulation in specific mental health disorders. That's one function. There are many others, but this is not a seminar on self-harm. But that's a core function. But there are others, by the way. It's a fascinating topic, self-harm and self-mutilation. I personally don't like self-harm. I like to harm. So,
first of all, yes, your presentation was amazing.
thank you. She is
Amazing.
She absolutely is. Yeah.
Going back to something you said earlier about the object permanence, internal and external. And you started sort of getting blown between the psychosis. How does that compare to gaslighting? Where the reactions were very much, I heard you say this, yes, you did do that, in terms of some sort of psychotic rage, versus actually, I'm making it up that you said that or did that. So how could you tell the difference?
Within the mythology, the emergent mythology of narcissism and the demonizing of narcissists, many actions that are actually unconscious for the narcissist, non-intentional, have been transformed into intentional evil acts. So, for example, the vast majority of lies that narcissists tell are technically not lies, but what we call confabulations. Confabulation is when there's a gap in personal memory and the person creates a plausible bridge, plausible explanation for this gap, and then begins to believe in it. So this is called confabulation. Narcissists actually, ironically, rarely lie because they have very bad memory. They are discontinuous. Narcissists are dissociative. They are aware of that. So narcissists actually rarely lie. But what they do, much more than almost all other mental health disorders except schizophrenics, what they do is they confabulate a lot. And they believe in it. They believe in the confabulations. So people perceive it as intentional lie. Similarly, a lot of gaslighting is actually non-intentional at all. It's simply the narcissist protecting the integrity of his internal objects by distorting or reframing history. History of the relationship, history of a conversation, history of an event, history of an object sometimes even. The picture, the painting was here. No, it never was here. No, it was here, but I remember, it was here. So, gaslighting is very, very often not intentional. It's still gaslighting. The question is not relevant because the motivation for the gaslighting is not relevant to the recipient, to the unfortunate recipient. But as far as a narcissist, it's all perceived as gaslighting. Narcissist doesn't say, I'm going now to drive her crazy. He doesn't say this. He simply needs to protect the integrity of his internal objects. So he must have you say something else. He must have you say something else. Otherwise, it's challenged. So if he must have you say something else, you must have said it. And I said, I never said it. No, you did. You did. Of course you did. Of course you said it. I heard it many times. So this is critical, I think, for you to understand. Very often narcissists and psychopaths are confused. I mean, online, disaster. They're confused. Psychopaths would gaslight you intentionally, with premeditated plans and so on. They would do that, not narcissism. Narcissism is essentially a compulsive disorder, obsessive compulsive, I would say. It's even it can be described as a form of OCD, a form of obsessive compulsive disorder. And because it is like that, huge part of narcissism is unconscious. Huge part, exactly like OCD. Huge part is unconscious. And narcissism, like OCD, is a series of rituals intended to reduce anxiety. So confabulation is a ritual, gaslighting is a ritual. But these rituals intended to reduce anxiety, narcissist is not aware of them. Just does them. Exactly like OCD. OCD would wash his hands 100 times. We ask you, why are you washing your hands? I'm dirty. I sweated. But of course he's washing his hands not because he sweated, but to reduce anxiety, to control something, reduce anxiety. Same with narcissists. He would gaslight you a lot. So why are you doing this? What do you mean? I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything. But it's to reduce his anxiety, attached to your independent, autonomous existence.
That myth of intentionality, I've spread it as well. I'm guilty of spreading that one. I just recently, and myself and Sam actually did 2 hours on this the other day. It'll be uploaded to YouTube soon. I started looking at the delusional and psychotic element, both in the narcissist or the psychopath and in the person receiving the abuse. Because I think you can start very easily to start drifting. I thought it was schizophrenia, but it sounds like it's actually like a kind of psychotic disorder. You're hearing things and seeing things that aren't there as the recipient, but the person who's transmitting is also hearing and seeing things that are not there. And it's not really been very well explored, as far as I know. But it's interesting, definitely very interesting. Did your hand go up? Yeah.
No, she asked already.
Yes.
Could you pass?
Democracy in action.
My question is, how does one stop manipulating everybody all the time?
How does one stop or
Yes,
start?
Stop.
Why would one stop? It's wonderful.
It's not,
It's addictive. It's absolutely addictive. That's spiritual.
it's not always
one stop
necessary.
Why stop manipulating? Like we're asking, how would one stop sex?
When I stop, I'll tell you why I did it. It's very normal for humans to manipulate each other. Are you asking from the narcissistic perspective, or as a human, or personal development? Where are we going?
As a human who's probably quite narcissistic, although not a narcissist, there was a question before about how people act as adults if they've been raised by a narcissist, and that you said it affects their interpersonal relating. And yes, and then you said about those, you talked about those strategies when you have when your parent is abusive in 5 different types. So
Okay, let me, before we go all over the place, let me, I'm covering Richard. I don't want you to pay attention.
You're not shot here. This is what it degenerated to.
First, it's important to re-emphasize what Richard said. Manipulation is how we relate to our human environment, even as healthy people. There is no such thing as a person who does not manipulate. What I think you're asking is malignant manipulation, or pernicious manipulation, or ill-intentioned manipulation. It's a different story. And if this is your question, then it doesn't pertain to the narcissist. Narcissists do not manipulate people for evil purposes. They rarely do it intentionally. And their manipulation is geared towards one thing only, obtaining supply. Give them supply, they're pussycats. They will not manipulate. I think, again, you're confusing psychopaths with narcissists, because psychopaths manipulate people intentionally, premeditatively, and very often with sadistic and evil intentions. So, psychopaths do that. Now, if you ask a psychopath how to stop manipulating people, the question would be unintelligible to him. Because a psychopath, it's like asking a fish, how would it feel to be outside the water? Manipulation is not only the psychopath's only means of communication and mode of communication, it's also his inner world. With the difference between narcissist and psychopath, narcissist defends against reality, because reality keeps challenging him. He thinks he's God. The reality tells him, actually, you're stupid, you're ugly, you're short. So he doesn't want reality. He says, the hell with it, I don't want reality. Lie to me, lie to me. The psychopath is utterly egocentric. His inner world and his outer world are in total sync. He's a master manipulator because he reads reality perfectly. Had he not been able to read reality perfectly, of course, he would not be able to scam and to con and to... That's why I came up with 7 years ago, and later scholars like Kevin Dutton and others, I was the first to come up with the concept of cold empathy. I said it's idiotic to say that psychopaths don't have empathy. How can I manipulate you if I don't have empathy? Zero empathy. Like, then I don't know anything about you. How can I use this machine? I don't know anything about this machine. I can never manipulate this machine. To manipulate this machine, let alone Lee, who is operating this machine, I need empathy. Yes, my empathy is without the emotional component, but I still need empathy. So this empathy without emotional component is cold empathy. Cold empathy leads to automatic, psychopaths manipulate the way you breathe. The question is so meaningless when it comes to psychopath, because if you take away the manipulation, nothing is left. Narcissists do manipulate, but they manipulate much more like children manipulate. Generally, as you watch narcissists, they're very childlike. They're very much like children. They also manipulate like children. Children would manipulate via temper tantrums, via misbehaving, via being cute, via academic accomplishments that are incommensurate with their age. And all this is what narcissists do. Psychopath doesn't bother with all this. Psychopath will go to your jugular. And if going to your jugular, there are 4 people on the way, he will kill them. So psychopaths are far less subtle, and actually they are adults. They're fully formed adults. There's a massive, indescribable fucking mess online confusing narcissists and psychopaths. I think even hopeless. I think it's even totally hopeless. Psychopaths are adults with cold empathy, well integrated in the world, with perfect reality tests, actually more perfect than normal people. Manipulative, but goal-oriented. Their manipulation is cold and meditated. They are also sometimes sadistic and evil for fun. You have to do something for fun. Narcissists are children. And exactly, if you think of narcissists as a child, you understand everything. Because the children need narcissistic supply, they are very self-centered, they have temper tantrums. So this a major difference between narcissists and psychopaths. The Diagnostic and Statistical the committee of the DSM-5, Diagnostic and Statistical considered for almost 2 years to abolish narcissistic personality disorder and to unite it with, to merge it with antisocial personality disorder, to make personality disorder with emphasis, like one personality disorder with narcissistic emphasis, psychopathic emphasis. After 2 years, they said, no way. No way. There's psychopathy and narcissism. There's almost nothing in common. We'll talk about it. Almost nothing in common. So your question is about psychopaths. If you feel that you are narcissistic and that you are manipulating people, everyone does, and narcissistic manipulation is relatively harmless. It rarely is at the expense of another. It's just intended to extract supply. Where the narcissist becomes aggressive and sometimes vicious, if his wish for supply is frustrated or negated, or if he's challenged with narcissistic injury. It's very similar to a hungry person. If you don't give someone food for 4, 5, 6 days, they become very vicious, trust me. Or sleep.
In some ways, the narcissist compared to the psychopath, narcissists are almost cute by comparison, aren't they? Because they can be satiated. You can satiate
Are you a
them.
narcissist or a psychopath?
Both.
Sorry? Ask that question into the mic. Go on.
Excellent question. We reserve it for dialogue. Super question.
Yeah, well, that's.
How can you be both if
I said excellent question. We reserve it for dialogue. Why repeat it?
We've got the dialogue starting at 4, and we'll cover that. We'll cover the question at 4 o'clock. We're going to take a break before then. We've got time for one more question, and then I suggest we take a break. Who should I give it to, comrade?
Give it to her because she's going to ask, are you really a genius?
Okay.
And then I say, yes, I'm really a genius.
Do psychopaths ever give up on their prey?
The psychopath ever give up on their prey?
Let me check. Was that what you asked? Yes.
Psychopath doesn't have prey. Psychopath has goals. If I want to have sex with you, I don't want you. I want the sex that you can provide. Or if you have money, I want to sponge it off you. Or if you are Deputy Prime Minister, I want to be close to you because I'll get contracts and so on. Unless you look like Theresa May. In this case, I think. Even the psychopath will give up. Yeah. So, it's a common confusion. again mythologizing. The prey, the predator. It's the drumbeats of the jungle. You see all kinds of black narcissists and black psychopaths crawling the forest floor. Something like that. Psychopath wants something. If you're on the way, he will kill you. If you can give it to him, he will take it. Once he had taken it, you can forget about him. The good thing about psychopaths, once they get what they want from you, you'll never see them again. As opposed to narcissists. The narcissist will always hope that he can extract supply from you. They are stalkers. You can't get rid of a narcissist. I mean, they recycle you, over you. I mean, but not so a psychopath. For example, if you have $1 million and I take $1 million off you, you'll never see me again. Trust me, because that's what I want. And but I will take everything. I mean, if you have $1 million, I will not be merciful and take 990,000. I will take everything. I will leave you without a penny for a bus. Nothing. That's true. That part is true. Psychopaths are utterly ruthless. Utterly. But they are, how to put it this way, they are predictable. Even, I would say, understandable. Who doesn't want money? It's not the ends of the psychopaths that make them psychopaths. It's the willingness to engage in means, in every means. Like, everyone wants $1 million. But very few people would threaten someone, or blackmail someone, or steal. Yeah? Psychopaths would do that. So it's the means, not the ends. This is why I keep saying, psychopaths are actually pretty normal. I even think there shouldn't be a mental health diagnosis like this. There shouldn't. It's indeed a social issue. It's a social deviance. Social deviance. They think the laws don't apply to them. They hate authority. They're defined. So, it reminds me of the famous diagnosis, oppositional defined disorder. Do you know how it's defined? I'm not kidding you. Go to the DSM. You don't have to trust me. I'm a psychopath. Don't trust me. Go to the DSM. To the school principal and other authority figures as a child, because oppositional defined disorder is only for children. That's how it's defined. Why should this be a mental, in the case of my principal, it proved mental health, trust me. Why should it be a mental health entity, clinical entity? Totally insane. Diagnostic and Statistical Manual was first published in 1952. It had 130 pages. Mysteriously, that so many years later, it has ballooned to 930 pages. No book that I know in any medical discipline, and I'm a medical doctor, maybe did not mention, no book that I know in any medical discipline went up 7 times. Clinical entities don't proliferate this way, you know? What proliferates? Insurance claims, pharmaceutical drugs, psychopharmacology. That proliferates. Money talks, bullshit walks, DSM.
Wondering if there's principles of cold therapy that can be used on an everyday basis to help situations with the narcissist.
Cold therapy is, to the best of my knowledge, the most extreme treatment modality ever invented. Of course, I invented it. That's why it's called cold, because I love cold. So it's an extreme form of re-traumatization. So the patient is brought into the session, into the clinical session, whatever. The ambient is hostile. It's not a holding environment. Like in all other therapies, the therapist is your friend. There's alliance. It's called therapeutic alliance. In cold therapy, therapist is your enemy, avowed enemy. He's hostile, absolutely hostile. And he re-traumatizes you. He creates a trauma. The foundation, the philosophical foundation of this is that if we want to re-traumatize something, we can't do it with a smile. It will not look real. It will not feel real. The patient needs to believe that he's being traumatized. So it's an extreme form. In the first third, there is serious risk of suicide. So the suicide watch and so on. It's an extreme form. The personality is broken to very small pieces. Then in this state of utter vulnerability, the patient is severely traumatized, recreating the primary trauma. And then, after the patient emerges from the trauma, there's a series of techniques, not to put him back together, it's not Humpty Dumpty, but to allow him to begin to build himself as an adult. What happens is simply the patient sees he doesn't need narcissism to survive. Now, there's a principle in psychology called mental economy. What is not needed shrivels and dies. Also applies to some part of anatomy. So, what is not needed shrivels and dies. So if you're as a patient, I take you, re-traumatize you and so on, and then you see that it's okay, I survive, I cope. I don't need my narcissism. It will die instantly. Because mental economy does not allow anything, defense mechanism, to survive a second if you don't need it. So that's what cold therapy does. In a nutshell, it's extremely complicated. I invented 25 proprietary techniques and so on. It's still being tested. I just took patients 45 and 46, so it's very, very early stages. All evidence is anecdotal, no big test runs, so I can't make any. I certified a few therapists in Vienna, then in Brazil, and now I'm certifying them in Prague, September, additional ones. So it's just starting, just early beginnings. I'm following in the footsteps of another Jew, not Jesus, because he ended badly, but in the footsteps of Sigmund Freud. That's what I'm not comparing myself to Sigmund Freud. I'm much superior. But the way he went about it. He invented psychoanalysis. Then he had a very small group of patients that he experimented on. Some of them survived, and then he continued to certify therapists that became kind of apostles or disciples or something, and so on. So I'm going exactly in his footsteps. Because I think psychoanalysis, I don't know about the value of therapy, but was a great marketing exercise. No, I'm being ironic, but actually I wrote a book about psychoanalysis, and I think it's one of the masterpieces of the human spirit and the human mind. An amazing thing. A piece of literature, actually, not very scientific, but what literature?
If perhaps I didn't get something, but is there a part of it that's sort of a necessary small phase to realize the person you're dealing with, and when does it become a real personal conspiracy theory you're stuck in?
Oh yeah, I was going to cover that, but I had too much coffee and I started bouncing off on another Can we go live now?
Of course.
And I will try and make that sound like it was my idea. You will be credited in no way whatsoever. Joking.
I'm glad I taught you well.
Yes. we on? So that was a very good question. Thank you. Before I was going to say that some of the things that I have expressed in the section with the PowerPoint presentation of, oh, you're here, you're there, this is where you're up to. I a couple of years ago thought it'd be cute to have it like a self-defense system, like a martial arts system, like you're a white belt, a green belt, a blue belt, and so on. It's a process. So is it a necessary phase to mythologize them in order to move forward to develop this personal conspiracy theory? Maybe. It's not the worst thing in the world, but with anything that's developmental, it's bad if you get stuck. And what we can say definitively is there are people on narcissistic abuse victim forums who have been stuck at one level for, some of them, for a decade. They're telling the same story about the same person and they presume to hand out advice to other people, which is incredible, which if other people don't take, they're like, how dare you, I've been here for 10 years. That discredits you, not fucking credit to you, idiot. You should be moving on with your life. I mean, I personally don't see how anybody could be stuck with this for longer than 2 years. That's a long time to be stuck in. I am my personal mythology is I'm the victim of abuse, and that defines who I am. 2 years is easily long enough. That's way too much time to be wasted. So yeah, I think it probably is a necessary phase. There is a question. It's coming up time and again. And it all focuses around this. As you identified before, there's a confusion. What are the real differences, both clinical and in practice, between narcissists and psychopaths? Is your mic on?
Yes, it is. This is my biography. What? You don't believe it, huh? Autobiography. That's a Slavoj Žižek non-imitation.
Sniff.
Well, start with the basics. Psychopaths don't need narcissistic supply. Very many of them hide. I mean, they're covert. They don't advertise their actions. Like they don't take an investment on the New York Times. I just swindled 100 old ladies of $2 million. Very few psychopaths do this. So they don't need narcissistic supply. They shy away from the limelight. They act covertly. and this is not a minor difference. The entire pathology of narcissism relies exclusively on narcissistic supply. Everything. Everything is regulated with supply. Emotions, cognitions, and yes, narcissists have emotions. Cognitions, defenses, everything is regulated with supply. And the fact that psychopaths don't need supply at all and even shy away from supply is the first crucial difference. Second difference is the use of impulse control. Narcissists don't have impulse control the way children don't have impulse control. They don't get what they want, they fly off the handle, fly off the bed. Psychopaths turn on and off, turn the rage on and off. They use it like a spigot. You don't give them what they want, they will intimidate you with rage. The minute you give them what they want, they turn off the rage. So the psychopath's rage is far more controlled than we are led to believe. There's an image that psychopaths are out of control, maniacs, but actually they're very calculated, very cold machines, and they can turn everything, not only rage, on and off. They're goal-oriented, utterly goal-oriented. Narcissists rage, so the psychopath consciously, intentionally, deliberately, premeditatedly turns rage on and off. The narcissist rage is utterly reactive, utterly automatic, and usually unconscious. So something happens, narcissists cannot help but rage. That's the second distinction. Third distinction is that a much higher percentage of psychopaths are sadists. So a much higher percentage of psychopaths are sadists. And that's why, of course, among serial killers, especially sadistic sexual sadists, psychopathy is comorbid with sexual sadism. And among non-sexual sadist serial killers, narcissism is common. So when we take non-sexual sadist serial killers, the guys who don't cut off tits and other things, these people are narcissistic. Serial killers who are sexual sadists, they take trophies and this kind of, Hannibal Lecter types, they are psychopaths, actually. So sadism is much more common among psychopaths. Next thing is that narcissists are far better at managing interpersonal relationships. Many narcissists are married. Most narcissists actually. They're married. They maintain marriages. Even if they are serial marriages, they still maintain marriages. Marriage is a complex relationship. They have to court, they have to convince the woman, they have to get married. So narcissists are much better at interpersonal relationship, while when we observe psychopaths, their lives are utter unmitigated chaos in terms of interpersonal relationships. They would marry one woman, abandon her, marry another, bigamy, not bigamy. They will leave children all over the place. They are like, it's a bloody mess. Psychopaths, of course, are much more criminalized than narcissists. Narcissists are actually pro-social, not antisocial. They're pro-social. If the narcissist were not pro-social, if the narcissist were not acting in concert with society and with its demands, and he would not be able to obtain supply. He would not become President of the United States. He would not become Chief Executive Officer. So the narcissist collaborates with society. He leverages society. He sometimes manipulates or abuses society. But he is working within society. It's extremely rare for the narcissist to actually challenge society. But psychopaths are antisocial, truly antisocial. They detest authority. They're defiant. They are what we call technically counter-dependent. They are criminalized. So in jail, for example, a majority would be psychopaths, not narcissists. Now, so why do we confuse the two? Confusion started with Robert Hare. Robert Hare is a Canadian, which would explain why he introduced the confusion. And
Blame Canada.
Blame Canada, absolutely. Canada is a place for psychopaths. So Robert Hare was a prison psychologist. Still alive, yeah? But during his career, active career, he was a prison psychologist. He spent well over 30 years in prisons. And exactly like Sigmund Freud constructed a whole theory of psychology based exclusively on sick people. So he Freud came up with the psychology of healthy people based on sick people. Robert Hare came up with the psychology of psychopaths based on prisoners, which is very misleading, because psychopathic prisoners are a tiny, actually, minority of psychopaths. But why is the confusion? Because Robert Hare invented something called PCL. Later, PCL revised, PCLR. It's a test. It's a test for psychopathy. Now, important for you to understand, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual Committee, starting 25 years ago, abolished, eliminated psychopathy. It's not a recognized mental health diagnosis in the DSM. Instead, we have antisocial personality disorder. Robert Hare never accepted this. So he kept maintaining there's actually antisocial personality disorder and psychopathy. Like they're two distinct things. So he invented a test for psychopaths to substantiate his claims. This test is called PCL. And here's the problem. A major part of the test is actually about narcissism. So the major dimension of the test is narcissism. When you diagnose using PCL, absolutely idiotic test, by the way. When you diagnose psychopaths with PCL, one of the major dimensions is narcissism. Now, why would I say that the PCL is idiotic? First of all, because I'm a very abrasive and impolite person. But the second reason I would say this is because the PCL is what we call self-reporting test. It's a test where you rely massively, conclusively, on the honesty, integrity of the person who is responding. So I find all self-reporting tests, the Narcissistic Personality Inventory, PCL, I mean, all these tests are utter idiocy and indicate also a total lack of understanding of the mental health issues they purport to diagnose. Now, Hare tried to correct the PCL by introducing another module, which is even more idiotic than the first one, which I thought was impossible. And the second module is, you ask the psychopath's wife what she thinks about him. And of course she will be utterly honest. She will say he's a horrible criminalized person, I hate him. She will not be afraid of him, for example, yes? So the test is nonsense, but it created enormous confusion because it's a corporate test. In other words, corporations buy a lot of copies of these tests and so on. And consequently, because corporations invest in universities, in the United States, everything is money, corrupt to the core. So because corporations invest in universities, universities adopted the test. The test has a pronounced narcissism dimension, which created unbelievable confusion. For this, Robert Hare deserves to join his research subjects. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. YouTube will throw us off the airwaves. So I think these are the 5 major differences between psychopaths and narcissists. I remember you. Do you want now to deal with how they can coexist?
Yes, please, yeah.
Okay. How can someone be both a narcissist and a psychopath? Narcissist needs supply, psychopath doesn't need supply. Narcissist cannot control his rage, psychopath can control the rage, narcissist is pro-social, psychopath is antisocial, and so on. They can both exist exactly the same way that multiple personality exists. And I will try to be a bit less flippant about this statement. Many, many years ago, when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, and I was young, I suggested that narcissistic personality disorder is a form of dissociative identity disorder. Because narcissists have 2 personalities. They have a true self, which is dilapidated and so on, but exists. And they have a false self. Now, it's a dissociative identity disorder with 2 personalities. But even more so, if you compare the host personality, the main personality, in dissociative identity disorder to the false self, you see that they're identical. The functions of the host personality in DID, in what used to be called multiple personality, are identical to the functions of the false self in narcissism. So this begins to look interesting. This might mean that narcissism is a breakdown of elements, constructs, a breakdown of parts of the personality, so that the narcissist actually has multiple personality disorder. Not true. Yes, true. Yes, true. Not true. Remember the not true. Yes, true. Yeah. So, if the narcissist has 2 personalities, at the very least. There's no reason in principle why you wouldn't have 3 or 4 or 5 or 9. But more commonly he has 2. So what's happening in the case of dual comorbidity, antisocial, and what happens is that the 2 personality disorders are allocated. They diverge. The false self become essentially psychopathic, and the true self is revived and becomes essentially narcissistic. Such a narcissist would be unusually infantile, because his narcissism is not mediated through his false self. It's mediated through the true self. So the true self is a kid, broken, crying, frightened kid in the corner with big eyeglasses in the corner. And usually in classic narcissism, the true self is inoperant, dysfunctional, does not contribute to psychological dynamics, is not involved in psychological dynamics. But in case of psychopathy and narcissism together, the true self is revived and becomes the locus of the pathological narcissism. And these narcissists consequently are at the age of the true self, at the mental age of the true self. So while a typical narcissist would be something like 9, I'm not exaggerating by the way, something with level of maturity of 9-year-old, a psychopathic narcissist would be with level of maturity of 5-year-old or 4-year-old. So for example, he would have much less impulse control than a typical narcissist, for example, which is all substantiated by the way. The psychopathic narcissism is a diagnosis first proposed by Elsa Roningstam and studied later, and so everything I'm telling you is based on these things. For example, rage attacks of the psychopathic narcissist, when they are reactive, lack of supply or frustration or so on and so forth, would resemble much more rage attacks of 5-year-old than 9-year-old. For example, they would be much less goal-oriented. They would be much less reality-based, and so on. We have tests how to. So we'd be much more like 5-year-old than 9-year-old. So the psychopathic narcissist transforms his false self into a psychopath and revives his true self to accommodate the narcissism. Of course, this raises immediately the question: why does a psychopathic narcissist need? Why does he need these 2 disorders? Remember the principle of mental economy. If you don't need it, if you don't use it or lose it. If you don't need it, it dies. Why did he need this? Well, usually because he grew up in an absolutely extreme concentration camp level environment where he needed psychopathy to survive. Narcissism was not enough. Narcissism was not enough. So he needed to escalate. He needed to absolutely become psychopathic just to survive. That's, for example, my case. I grew up in an environment that can easily compete and probably win over Auschwitz. I grew up in the most life-threatening environment. So I first developed narcissism, probably at the age of 4 or 5. It was not enough. So I had to escalate. I had to progress, and I developed psychopathy. When I'm observing myself, and of course I think by far the biggest database of people diagnosed with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. I have well over 1,500 structured interviews, which is like 50 times the typical publication. So when I look at these people, I can clearly see the escalation, the need for escalation in extreme environments, and the fixation of the narcissistic part at a very, very early age, sometimes 3. Very early age. Sometimes even pre-verbal, so that when the narcissist tries to express himself, he gets stuck, literally stuck. For example, in therapy, he would say, I don't know how to say this. He begins to stutter, because it's a pre-verbal phase. And then if you trigger that patient to switch from narcissism to psychopathy, for instance, by offering him to collaborate on some business venture, which immediately provokes a psychopathy, he immediately becomes extremely fluent. Extremely fluent. So he would start, for example, you ask him, I don't know, you offer some supply. You say, you're great, you're a genius. You're this. So he would stutter. He would be like a child, like a small child, pre-verbal child. He would, thank you very much, doctor. I don't know what to say, this kind of thing, or stutter. So thank you, really thank you, like Slavoj Žižek. But then you would contaminate the session on purpose. We say, you know, I'm about to open a new clinic, we'll make a fortune and so on. That's an example of contaminating the session to evoke or to provoke the psychopath. He would immediately become extremely fluent, extremely analytical, goal-oriented and so on. It's like utterly, I mean, you've never seen that, but it's two personalities, simply. Two people with nothing to do with each other. Also the body language. The narcissistic side is very childlike. The psychopath is more like businessman. It's like immediately, and it's mind-boggling in a way. I think we're not paying enough attention to this multiple personality aspect of narcissism. We're not, and as long as we don't, I don't think there would be any productive integration techniques. Cult therapy is not an integrative technique or integrative treatment modality. It's a deconstructivistic treatment modality. I'm breaking the narcissist apart. I never put him back together. I'm just breaking him apart. So he says he can survive even without narcissism. But after that, someone has to, I mean, there should be some process of growth and integration, identity formation via integration. And as long as we don't recognize the multiple personality aspect, I don't think it would be possible to integrate the narcissist. No one came up with a treatment modality for this yet, because no one bothered, because no one succeeded to get rid of the narcissism. Yeah? But if cult therapy is successful, there will be many, many people around who are not narcissists, but no longer have the defenses. They're exposed. They're like a turtle without a shell. And an integrative modality will be called for immediately. But I think there's a series of huge mistakes in therapy with narcissists, but we're not going to it right.
Do you think you could have a situation where you could even therapeutically start to make headway with the narcissistic response and then have the psychopathic response come in and kick it down, or vice versa?
So here's the problem, I think, in therapy. Therapists make many mistakes when they deal with narcissists. First of all, they assume that narcissists are adults. Narcissistic patient comes to therapy, the therapist treats the narcissist as an adult. You know, they try to strike a therapeutic alliance, set goals. I mean, fuck, that's a 9-year-old. I mean, what are you talking to? The approach should be approach of child psychology, not adult psychology. It's the first catastrophic mistake. The second mistake is to treat the narcissist as though he's actually an Ubermensch or Superman. While the narcissist actually is in extreme post-traumatic condition. Unusually extreme. I would even compare, because I used to be a soldier, I would compare it, I would say, to combat experience. Combat experience, this narcissist went through hell. I have never had a worse period in my life. I was in intelligence services, I was in army, I have never had anything remotely like my childhood. So the trauma was massive. Narcissists are post-traumatized. The attitude should be, I'm about to answer your question. Mm-hmm. Although it's not very important, but okay.
Pretend.
Pretend, yes. Yeah. So that's the second mistake. One thing that, I mean, coming back to Richard's question, I have no idea why, is there's, I love to devalue him. Absolutely love it. But he's so kind, so patient. I mean, he's a martial arts expert. He could decapitate me. I could be finally on an ISIS film, but he doesn't. He smiles benignly. He tolerates me.
Sharpens the blade.
Sharpens the blade. Tolerates me. Coming back to Richard's question. First of all, don't get alarmed. There are extremely few people who are psychopathic narcissists. Most people are psychopaths or narcissists. Very, very few people are both. The few that are both would benefit from converting the psychopath into the protector of the narcissist, endowing the psychopath side with the powers that usually belong to the host personality in dissociative identity disorder. That's precisely what we do in treatment of dissociative identity disorder. We strike an alliance with the host. Say to the host, we'll talk to you. You decide which personality comes forward. When we want to talk to any personality, we go through you. We'll never circumvent you. Host, can we talk to Richard? Host says, Richard is too young for that. Or Richard is busy, he's protective.
The host is the true self?
I'm sorry?
The host is the true self?
False self, you've not been listening.
Okay.
the marriage is off. So
I'm taking notes, so I will write. It's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah.
So to approach the false self in the role of the host, and to convert this psychopathic entity into a protective entity. You can ask, why would the psychopath protect the narcissist? I mean, what for? We need to offer a reward. It needs to become goal-oriented. So, for example, you can tell the combination, if you do this, you will be much more productive at work, and your chances for promotion are much better, much higher. You need to build a reward system to steal from Richard Grannon, because he stole from me earlier. You need to build plagiarism. You need to construct a reward system and tell the psychopath, if you work with us, collaborate and this and that, as a host, this will be the reward. But the attitude should be exactly an integrative attitude, like the treatment of DID. Finally, what we do in dissociative identity disorder, we merge all the entities. It's a process called integration. We merge them. We make them all feel safe in the treatment, in the therapeutic environment. We strike an alliance with the host, and then we convince the host that actually it can safely merge gradually with entity 1, entity 2, entity 6, until finally all the entities are united. Now, in the case of psychopathic narcissists, the host is a psychopath. So once we unite the psychopath with the narcissist, we remain with the psychopath. So in the best case, in the case of psychopathic narcissists, we end up with a psychopath. But the psychopath is a hell of a lot more functional than the narcissist. So it's a trade-off.
This is day 6 for me. Yeah. I dream of this stuff. I go to bed and I'm dreaming. And then
I am his nightmare.
He appears. He goes, and one more thing I forgot to mention. Oh shit.
The zombie apocalypse.
Does anybody have any questions? We have some topics that we're going to cover. Steve, would you be able to hand the mic out, please, mate? Thank you. Cardio for Steve now. So if you make the distance, he has to travel as far as possible, please. Burpees in between everyone.
Yeah, he needs the exercise. Lob the microphone, lob it like a grenade.
When I translate that, I'm going to give you the screen capture. It will be a PDF, and then my translation of this scroll. Sorry, go ahead, please.
I'm just wondering, when it comes to being stalked by a narcissist, how do you get rid of them if, say, legal action hasn't worked and Grey Rock is not working either? What are they getting from it if they're not getting any supply from you?
You should also contribute. Well,
sorry, ask the question again.
Stalking. When it comes to stalking, and no technique works,
and they're not getting any supply.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think when I was working in the self-protection field, I ended up reading far too much literature about how these things can develop, and stalking is something to be taken very, very seriously. So that's almost verging into a self-protection question. And the literature indicates that in a high enough percentage of cases that we should be taking it seriously. Stalking can develop into something else. And it can actually then become something criminal. It should be registered with your local police, and you should be fastidious and dull in the way that you do it, and you have to keep telling them that it's happening, and you keep a record of everything that is going on. If the stalking is not social media, but it's actually physical, as in they're showing up outside of your house, if you can try and take pictures, then you should. I am not qualified to give legal advice, he said into the cameras. This is not legal advice. This is just me talking to you as a mate. I once read somewhere that this is good
illegal advice.
This is illegal advice.
Illegal advice.
Yes, that's when you pay the local gangsters to sort them out.
Exactly. I mean, why go through all this?
Yeah.
Just find someone to break his knees. They will never see.
Anna can help you with this. We have friends everywhere. So yeah, even if they're not getting supply, as Sam said earlier, some of this type of narcissistic, psychotic experience is because you're an internalized part of them. So they can even be confused that you're not talking to them, though externally you're not, but internally you are. I've had this. I have stalkers. I have somebody stalking me now, which is why we had a security guard.
I don't have anyone.
We can get you some. We can get you some in
Someone
time.
stalk me.
Sometime. It's boring. You wouldn't like it.
I like it. Stalk me, please.
In the experience I've had, they're having a relationship with me whether I like it or not. And they send me emails that let me know, like, you had told me last night when I spoke to you, and I'm going, I don't fucking speak to you, so I don't know who you're talking to. They're talking to themselves. It's narcissistic because there's no ego boundary. So you exist inside of that person's internal world. So even if you're not giving them anything, they can still force a relationship through their experience of stalking. And we spoke about this the other day. Remember the stalking of Jodie Foster? You were saying the guy would have the experience of a relationship.
I think Richard focused more on a group of stalkers called erotomaniacs. More technically, it's called the Clérambault syndrome. That's the official term, not erotomaniacs. The Clérambault syndrome. These are stalkers that they're not exactly narcissists, but they're not narcissists actually, but they're interesting. So I don't know if you want, we can talk about them for 2 minutes. These are stalkers who believe that their love object loves them back, so they confuse internal and external. But they have another layer of belief. They believe in coded messages. They read into everything you do a message. So I don't know, you post something on Facebook, you're telling me you love me. Or so they are actually kind of, if you want, inverted paranoids. They have a conspiracy theory actually involving both of you. And in this conspiracy theory, you are sending encrypted messages that only the two of you can understand. But sometimes, because it's confusion between internal and external, they can say, well, she doesn't know it yet. She's sending me coded messages, but even she doesn't understand what she's sending. Or she loves me, but she doesn't know it. Or she loves me, but she's afraid of it. In due time, she will come to accept it. So they're utterly confused between internal and external, overt message and covert message, and on the time axis. Because for them, the future is here. She will love me one day, so I can behave as though she loves me now. Obviously, because they don't have external and internal, they are home invaders. They're the kind of stalkers that appear in Jodie Foster's kitchen. I wouldn't mind being in Jodie Foster's kitchen. But I know she loves me.
She's a lesbian.
I know she loves me. I saw her latest movie. It was very clear. She loves me. I added all the letters of the executive producers. It says, Vaknin, you are irresistible. Yes?
Clear as day.
Clear, beyond discussion. So I'm heading to her kitchen, but this is this type of this is by far the most dangerous stalker, type of stalker, by far. There are other types of stalkers. The paranoid stalker. Paranoid stalker is very possessive, territorial, and refuses to believe that you can have a life of your own, have another partner, intimate partner, and so on. So that paranoid partner prefers to kill you than to allow you to have an independent life. Ironically, the reason is because he fears losing control over you. And he fears losing control over you because he feels that you still possess parts of him. Could be information about him, could be whatever. So paranoid stalker is also very... Narcissistic stalkers stalk you for supply, usually. So like, again, if you give them supply, they will leave you alone. Also, luckily, if you go seriously no contact, they will leave you alone. They're not like paranoids who would follow you from state to state and fake identities and so on. They're not like erotomaniacs who will invade your kitchen even if you don't have one. They are not this type of stalkers. They're not persistent. We call them persistent stalkers. Narcissistic stalker is anecdotal. Give me supply. No, okay, bye. Moving on. Let's stalk someone else.
So that would explain why the grey rock technique wouldn't work in that scenario, because it's probably not a narcissist that you're dealing with.
Most probably, absolutely. Yeah. If I don't get what I want, I'll move on. Narcissists don't have time for this game. I mean, I will stalk you for a while, like I will stalk you for half a year. It doesn't work, but I mean, it doesn't work. Of course, if I see that you didn't block me on your iPhone, that in itself is a message. You want my messages. You don't have to answer. No contact means no contact. If someone is sending you a message on the iPhone, on the phone, and you don't block him, that's communication. Understand? So, but total no contact. Like you vanish off the face of the earth. I mean, no narcissist will invest time in finding you, but paranoid will. And erotomaniac will invade your space. For example, make you a captive, a hostage. Hostage situations involve erotomaniacs. And they're deadly. Erotomaniacs and paranoids are deadly. Very often, these situations end up in carnage and bloodshed. Not so the narcissist.
This exactly what Sam described, and seeing messages and things has happened to me. On Instagram, I joked that I'd seen a couple of unicorns in one day, and this particular individual said, "So have I," and I jokingly said, that proves that we're connected. Silly me. Then she was sending me emails saying, "I know you've been talking to me. I've seen the unicorns everywhere." I said, "There's something called affirmation bias. If we tune into unicorns, we'll all see unicorns or red post boxes or silver Mercedes. It's just you're switching on the reticular activation system. That's all it is." She went, "Ha ha ha. No, I know. I know you're talking." And she genuinely then built a narrative based on these signs that I was in love with her because she saw the signs. "What are you talking about? As surely as if you've sent me a text message." And at that point, I didn't know what I was dealing with. I just was like, wow, this is beyond me. You're looking for advice on how to get rid of somebody who's doing this currently? To me, that's like it would be a legal issue. I really wouldn't know of a technique for that. Would you have anything to say on that?
I don't know. There's somebody. It's very misleading to say stalker. It's like saying someone who eats bananas.
Bananas?
Someone eaten by bananas. I mean, someone who eats bananas could be a male, could be a female, could be a narcissist, could be. It's very misleading. Stalker is misleading. You must classify to get the proper advice. You must identify the stalker. If it helps any, on my website there are dozens of pages dedicated to techniques, stalking, identifying stalkers, techniques against stalkers, and so on and so forth on my webpage.
Steve will help you. I'll just go around and knock them out. Another question, please. Yes, sir.
How would you get somebody that is very not narcissistic into therapy in the first place if they consider themselves to be like godlike?
Yeah.
I mean, and what level of narcissism would they have to be before they actually become that the cold therapy would actually work on them?
I'll have a go at that, make a mess of it, and I'll hand it over to Sam to clean it up.
As usual. Why did you have to say that? What you usually do?
I'm very, 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 very cynical of the idea that somebody who is anywhere on the spectrum showing up to therapy. Extremely cynical. But this may be my own, micro trauma experiences of having worked with people who are narcissistic, of it being anything other than an opportunity to practice their skill set. I mean, therapy is the most delicious, beautiful moment where there's 100% pure supply just coming at me from an educated man or an educated woman, and she's fascinated by my thoughts. I'm just like, Jesus, this is so dangerous. It's gasoline straight to the fire. 100%. 100%. It's a beautiful experience for them. It's not challenging for them, which is why I think if there's any hope whatsoever for this kind of thing, it has to be Sam's way, which is, listen, this will hurt. This is going to be uncomfortable. Are you ready for this? It's not going to be validating. It's going to be invalidating to the point where your personality falls apart. My God, if they really, really want to heal, that is the sales pitch that I believe in. There's no point in you coming to me for like, oh, please, I get it all the time. I'm a narcissist. Can I have a chat? Like, no, because I don't know what to do with you. It will just become a circular conversation that will just be completely masturbatory. I started, you may have seen it years ago on the YouTube videos, being used as an emotional dildo. And that's all you are, a plastic penis, dildo, whatever you want. And then, and it goes nowhere, other than they're gratified at the end of the session. I am completely exhausted. How should I put this, my God? And they are full, they're, what do you call it? Invigorated. You're messing hard. I am soft and flaccid and broken. I don't like, and it's after the 50th go of the merry-go-round, I was like, okay, this is a waste of my time. So I think to sort of wrap this in a bow, the classic therapeutic formation is actually, I claim, a total waste of time. It's a waste of time. Therapy is two adults in a room having a conversation. There's no biological intervention. There's no chemical intervention. It's sit with me for an hour out of your week and then change how you process reality. My God, when it works, we've done really, really well. Does that answer your question?
I'll sort of relate to because my ex-wife, she was obviously diagnosed with borderline, but she got like DBT. But it did nothing. It just went on the shelf, and I kept getting it out all the time. I said, look, this is going to help you. This is going to...
So with the borderline, the prognosis is better, and if anything would work, it would be DBT. If anything can, but it takes
a lot of work.
I know in Terry's case, he's getting a little bit of traction after a year.
As a borderline?
As a borderline.
It sounded like he's a borderline.
Well, I'm working with Terry. He's a little better now. No, one of his clients. It's a year. And it's humility, and she's really in a place where she's like, my life doesn't work, this sucks, this is not an effective strategy for me, I really, really, really want to change. And so DBT type techniques, critical thinking, mindfulness, setting boundaries, these are the things that can actually work, but if she wasn't keen on it in the first place.
As I read somewhere that the borderline from Pete Walker's book, that the borderline has a narcissistic core. This narcissistic course, I wondered if it's kind of got are they very core, very come across as narcissistic? It's very difficult to try to pinpoint whatever's going on.
It is. But what I will do is I'll hand over to Sam for a proper answer.
Not you monopolize. Let's not let one question monopolize.
Yeah.
I didn't mean you.
Yes, I know.
I swear on my mother's grave that she's still alive.
I understood. Don't let this one question monopolize. But now I will monopolize. You have asked me and I will keep going. This is ideology at its purest. It's pure. I love it.
I came all the way to hear this. No, I don't have much red. I fully agree with you.
Yeah?
It's shocking, I know, but yeah.
Cut that.
Cut that.
He's not a narcissist.
yeah, I fully agree. Cold therapy is perhaps the only exception because in cold therapy the narcissist comes to cold therapy having hit rock bottom, as he would to any other kind of therapy. But before he knows it, he's decapitated, dismembered, burned on the stake, and spread among at least 3 known oceans. Which leaves very little by way of resistance. And I'm serious completely. Is the initial violent attack in cold therapy leaves no place for games, mind games or any other game. The mistake of this, one of the mistakes of all other classical therapies, as I said, treating the narcissist as an adult and this, but one other major mistake is that the therapist allows the narcissist too much leeway, gives the narcissist too much leeway. It's like, what would you like to discuss? Can we talk about this? What the fuck gives? Who cares what you would like to discuss? Narcissist comes there, and he is treated like in a maximum security prison, mentally speaking, psychologically speaking. So he has no time, and also there's no point in, for example, competing with the therapist, or one-upmanship, or arm wrestling with the therapist. Because the therapist is in such a superior and hostile position in cold therapy that he's unattainable, untouchable. The narcissist doesn't create complex theoretical constructs. The narcissist goes straight to the jugular, straight to the core, and immediately encourages transference, immediately acts in the role of an abusive, sadistic parent, encourages transference. Most treatment modalities discourage transference. In cold therapy, we encourage actively, we create it, forcefully, transference, but of a sadistic, abusive parent. So that's why the first third of cold therapy there is serious suicide risk. Serious, because grandiosity is challenged, defenses are challenged, and everything is challenged. But I mean challenged brutally. It reflects my character. I'm kidding you not now. And I'm like that. I'm abrasive, I'm brutal, I'm violent, and so on. So every work of every kind, work of art, theory, reflects its originator. That's my style. I don't believe in half measures and so on, perhaps because I'm an Israeli. When someone fires a rocket at me, I level his city. So.
What about schemotherapy?
Schemotherapy, MDR, I mean, there are numerous numerous therapies claim to have an effect on narcissism. What they actually achieve is behavior modification. Abrasive behaviors disappear, antisocial behaviors disappear. For a while, sometimes forever. That's not the core. And that's not the problem, by the way. The abrasive behaviors and the antisocial behaviors are not the narcissist problem, they are other people's problem. Narcissists have no problem with this abrasive and antisocial behavior. Other people have the problem. So actually these therapies act on behalf of society, not on behalf of the patient. Understand? So the core. The core has to do with delusional reality test, with grandiosity, with self-obstruction, extreme self-obstruction, I mean, these are the core issues. And no therapy comes remotely close to dealing with it, or capable of dealing with it.
I have a question.
No, can't believe this. Really?
It's a good one.
It's an unprecedented event.
Please.
Now, it is not my intent. I'm not even an apprentice, but I'm sure you're a master.
You're fired.
Okay, great. Is it possible, I'm sure you can, is it possible to heal a narcissist? And let's suppose it is. You said that one of the ways is just to destroy the narcissist. Okay. Now, what's the difference between destroying and healing a narcissist and destroying and causing a narcissistic injury over and over again without going nowhere?
First of all, I advise you to dispense a little with the literary language. In therapy, we don't destroy, we don't heal. This is in the Vedas, in scriptures. I think, at least. I think any therapist who claims to heal is well advised to join one of the established churches. He's in the wrong profession. We don't heal. We change people. We make them more functional sometimes. We help them sometimes. Often we fail. We try. Healing is a big word, very big. Destroying is even bigger word. Cold therapy, because narcissism is ubiquitous, because it is all pervasive, it's perhaps one of the greatest challenges in mental health, because you need to dismantle everything. It's not enough, for example, to focus on the pathology and to kind of attack the pathology, but you need to dismantle everything. It's all utterly metastasized. Think of it as cancer. Everything is metastasized. Emotions, cognitions, interpersonal relatedness, functioning. I mean, everything is totally infected. It's like someone with liver cancer, metastasized, he has 3 months to live. You know. So it's perhaps the sole, or one of the few cases where you have to dismantle the person in order to achieve any kind of change. Now, as you can immediately see, that's not narcissistic injury. Narcissistic injury is a challenge to grandiosity on a very limited front. And it's usually passing, the narcissist immediately activates defense mechanisms, and it's not even remotely close. I mean, it's like scratch compared to amputation of all extremities, including the head. So
that was exactly the metaphor that I was going to use. It's like a kitten scratch. That's a narcissistic injury. What he's talking about is total dismantling.
This presents, of course, a problem, the Humpty Dumpty problem. If the therapy is so pervasive, so invasive, actually, in terms of medicine, so invasive, that we have to dismantle absolutely everything because it metastasized everywhere. How do we put this thing back together? I mean, what is this thing? How do we, first of all, how do we kind of decontaminate the parts? And then how we put them back together, and without the contamination, will they function at all? Because many of these parts are infantile. They're frozen, they're childlike, they're infantile. They don't have the level of maturity or even the level of defense mechanisms required to function. So once you dismantle the narcissist, this is where the suicide risk kicks in, because many of these parts are totally childlike or even pre-verbal childlike, and all the defense mechanisms are shut off, which is a process we call decompensation. So in psychosis, for example, what leads to psychosis? The phase before psychosis is called decompensation. It's when all the defense mechanisms shut off, and the person is so vulnerable, so open, that actually there are no boundaries anymore. The internal objects become external. So it's like disemboweling the person. So we have similar problems in cold therapy. There's definitely risk of psychosis, irreversible psychosis. There's risk of suicide. This is extreme treatment, extreme chemotherapy. So
And it works.
until now we've had 44. Until now we've had 44 volunteers. An average of 3 years later. The furthest was 6 years. I mean, the first one was 6 years ago. I just followed up on her with her a few weeks. I mean, before I came. So until now, all 44 are no longer diagnosable as narcissists, in the sense that if we administer MMPI test or any other test, MPI is rubbish, but okay, we administer that also. There's no trace of narcissism in any of them. They're fully functional, extremely happy. They had major depressive episodes that also vanished, which was a major surprise. I did not think when I designed cold therapy that it will have any effect on depression. I didn't think of depression at all. But it proves a very old theory about narcissism, that narcissism is actually a depressive illness. There was a very, very old theory in the 50s and 60s that narcissism is actually a depressive illness. It's a compensatory defense mechanism against depression. And it seems, perhaps it's right, because cold therapy eliminates major depressive episodes, which usually require years of antidepressants and talk therapy. In 20, 30 cases already. Eliminated, and most recent one is number 45, which joined 3 months ago. Eliminates major depressive episodes in all of them, in 100% of them, within anything between 3 weeks and 3 months, which is unheard of. Cold therapy is like therapy on steroids. But maybe it stands to reason, because if you dismantle someone, put them back together, you would put them back, or you don't put them back together, but if you dismantle someone, perhaps all the demons, apropos exorcism, all the demons, perhaps, in other words, what I'm trying to say, perhaps depression reflects internal dynamics between personality constructs. It's crucially dependent on internal psychodynamics between constructs. And once you deconstruct, many mental illnesses vanish, which in itself is an interesting idea, by the way, in itself.
Not just for narcissism.
Not only narcissism, not only depression. Perhaps we could recast the whole of clinical psychology in terms of dialogues between internal constructs. So maybe. And there is, Richard mentioned system theory and so on. There is what we call network theory of clinical psychology. It's a theory borrowed from computing, network theory in computing. So they took network theory in computing and they applied it to psychology, but instead of nodes, which are computers in the network, they put constructs. So they created a map of the human psyche with constructs on a network. And then they used the mathematics of network theory, which is used in computing, in computers. They used it then to describe the interactions between nodes, between constructs. And amazingly, they were able to describe all mental illnesses perfectly. So I'm beginning to think, and I'm not the first, so I'm not pioneering this and so on. I'm beginning to think that probably what we call mental illness is disrupted flow of information or disrupted dialogue between inner constructs. Well, of course, in classic therapy, we realize that. So, for example, CBT, we cope with negative automatic thoughts and so on. In psychoanalysis, we have this tripartite model. So we realized intuitively that there's something inside. But no one systematized it to that extent. It seems that cold therapy disrupts the dialogue, cuts the communication off completely, but completely. Of course, if you do that, all processes will stop. Healthy processes, sick processes, everything will stop. But after that, because of the principle of mental economy, the sick processes will vanish. What will be left is to restart the healthy processes, which will restart automatically. I don't do that. It's simply start again.
Well, the human psyche is self-healing by nature, I think.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's a little like a wound healing with fibrinogen and so on. So I wound the person, which is a pleasure. That's the part I love. So he never believes me. I, in effect, kind of amputate the person. I wound the person severely. And then once I wound the person, all the toxins go out and so on, but the body begins to... There were two schools in medicine, a little before my time, 19th century and 17th century. So, not long, but a little before my time. So, there was one school in medicine that believed that if you have a symptom, you have to exacerbate it, make it worse, to heal. So people with fever or temperature, they were giving them all kinds of substances to make the fever worse.
Homeopathy.
Kind of homeopathy, but they were using real toxins and real poisons and so on. So that was one school. And the other school believed that if you have any internal medical problem, by a well-planned series of cuts or pricks, acupuncture, by planned series of cuts or
Leeches.
Leeches, by well-planned series of invasions. Could be any kind of invasion. The kind of evil spirits will go out. It's very old school of medicine. So to this very day, Native American tribes heal or cure many diseases by cutting. Castaneda describes it in his by cutting. Simply they make pre-planned cuts. And like the evil spirits go out. So essentially cold therapy is doing this. We are cutting, we are totally dismantling the inner, and we're disrupting the inner dialogue completely. And then because the inner dialogue is disrupted, all processes stop, including pathological processes. But the body heals itself then. But it doesn't heal the pathological it recreates only the healthy part, not the sick part. And I think that's how it works. Total metaphor.
Beautiful.
I'm trying to explain how cold therapy works. I'm not sure.
When they're talking about psychedelics for therapy, particularly ayahuasca, which is being touted as this great panacea for problems, MDMA now as well, I do wonder if it's on the same principle, which is that you have a neural pathway, if you want it in these kinds of terms. The narcissist has a neural pathway. That's the neural pathway that they've used for interacting with the world since they can remember, perhaps some said pre-verbal, and then some stupid therapist says, yeah, don't do that anymore. There's just no, even if the will was there to do it, I think it's a cruel thing to ask. I think you're asking them to do the impossible. When you have major trauma that is a shock to the system, there has to be neuroplasticity to recover. Ayahuasca, DMT, maybe that induces a similar level of neuroplasticity, whereby then you can actually start to make choices on a primal, non-conscious level.
Is that correct?
It does make you throw up, but they claim you're throwing up evil spirits. It's similar to the medieval sort of medieval view, the ill humours, like it's very, very similar to the medieval view that you're cutting so that it was the humours, wasn't it? The ill humours they would talk about would come out. Similarly with ayahuasca, they're claiming that you're throwing up. I think it's just a byproduct of what's happening with your stomach acids. But the neuroplasticity effect, I think, is very interesting. The idea that through shocking the system, you're inducing neuroplasticity. Through the psychedelics, obviously, it's directly affecting you at the level of neuroplasticity. Maybe so that you awaken with the option to lay down a new neural pathway that gives you new options. There can be no real healing without changing these neural pathways. And I don't think the standard coaching session, let's sit down and have a chat, is enthralling or inspiring, impressive enough to really do that. So when I'm doing it with people, what we do in coaching is we try and make up for it with repetition. So we'll say, do this every day, so that the neural pathway can be laid down. Under other circumstances, like you say, like the Native American things where they'll cut, they'll drill holes in their head, you know, with no seriously, to release evil spirits, they'll put a hole in your head. That is so traumatic and so impressive with chanting and everything else that your mind will go, well, there was a period before that happened, and then that happened, and it creates like a fire break in experience. So in terms of your neural networks, you will remember. That's, I think, why initiation has to be traumatic, why initiation has to be awful. It's about nothing else but a marker into the neural network. If it's not horrendous, if I'm not in agony begging for death, it'll just be some event that happened. Yeah, I remember we sat in the tent, we sang the song, got naked, rolled around, don't judge me. And then we came out and it was okay. There's things we need to discuss later, right? Yes. But if it's, you know, these things that they do in South America with the fire ants, where they put their hand into a glove filled with fire ants, they have to do it 17 or 18 times. Apparently one of these bites induces enough pain that it's like nothing else on earth. They're bitten hundreds of times. They go into an altered state in order to do it. These are markers. These are markers. They're there. They burn into the neural networks. You won't forget. Whereas average therapy and coaching...
You've never gone through labor, I believe.
No, I haven't.
Well, yeah.
I think,
are you a medical doctor?
I think continuing Grannon's sadistic presentation, I think there are many precedents to what cold therapy does via words. First of all, the distinction between words and physical interventions or physical invasion is utterly superficial. It's been demonstrated in functional MRI that talk therapy, or talking, has massive effects in the brain, changes neural pathways, affects neuroplasticity, and so on. When I talk to you, I put my hand in your brain. I play with it, especially I. So, this is the first thing. So, cold therapy is the exact equivalent of a scalpel, for me. It has effects on the brain. But it's not unprecedented. Remember, for example, lobotomy. A horrible procedure. Reprehensible procedure. But what was the philosophy behind it? That if you can sever, if you can cut a path of communication between parts of the brain, you can cure. The literature is pretty clear, by the way. Lobotomy was highly successful. Lobotomy was supposed to cure depression and disruptive behavior, antisocial behavior. And it cured both, probably by making the people zombies. But irony aside, that's a philosophy, cutting the communication channel. Similarly for, do you know how lobotomy was performed? Did you ever see? Through the pupil of the eye, without anesthesia. Without.
Did they have to remove the eye?
No. They just inserted it through the pupil, direct to the brain, and cut the connection. Luckily, the brain has no pain sense receptors.
The eyes do.
The brain has not the pupil. The brain has no pain receptors. So you can do anything. You can absolutely have brain surgery without anesthesia. I think they give anesthesia for the doctors, because you can have brain surgery without anesthesia. The only risk is, of course, if suddenly the patient moves. But otherwise, pain-wise, there's no pain. So lobotomy. Electroconvulsive therapy. Electroconvulsive therapy achieves exactly the same, disrupts communication. If you monitor with EEG, by the way, electroconvulsive therapy, I don't know if you know, it's still used in many institutions. So today we have fMRIs these days, we made many studies on them. So we see, for example, clearly, the minute before electroconvulsive therapy, there's communication here, there, blood flows here, blood flows there. You give the shocks, and all communication is disrupted. I mean, totally disrupted. It's like a very bad signal on a very bad television from my childhood. When I had to stand with the antenna, I do this. So, communication disruption, cerebral disruption of communication as a therapeutic philosophy is absolutely unprecedented. Nothing new about it. I'm not doing it with a scalpel, and I'm not doing it with electricity, although the more I talk about it, the more I like it.
It's growing on
So,
you.
it's growing on me. So, I'm doing it with words. But words can be very sharp scalpels, as many of you can attest.
Next question, please, guys.
Hello, can you hear me?
Just about. The mic doesn't go through the system or anything. It's just it's just for that.
It just looks good. Can you hear me?
Just about, yeah.
Let's try and speak.
It's like an Israeli smartphone. You hold the smartphone, reach on!
Okay, I'm going to ask a slightly different question to what we've been doing today.
Sure.
What if the abusive parent with the narcissist, who is also narcissistic, then, so the abusive parent is manipulating the narcissist for supply later on in life? How do you get the narcissist to see that he's being manipulated?
She's talking about her
by the
ex-husband,
abusive
isn't she?
parent?
And her future husband. What?
You're talking about a specific situation.
I really didn't understand the
A
question.
little bit, yeah.
With 190 IQ, I didn't understand the question. Yeah.
Yeah, so how do you get the narcissist to see he's being manipulated by the abusive parent in later life?
Your ex-husband and the mother-in-law.
No comment.
Who is the abusive? I mean, narcissist is the abusive parent.
The question sounds like this because she's talking about a specific situation in which she doesn't want to say that it's her ex-husband.
So there was a parent, and the parent was abusive,
Yeah.
was manipulating a narcissistic.
I'll translate. My ex-husband was a narcissist, and the mother-in-law is still controlling him and abusing him. How do I intervene? Is that about right? Not that you did say that, but if you did, is that what you would say?
If I was the person.
If you were the person, which you're not. Is that what you're asking? How do we disrupt the communication between the mother-in-law and the son?
Yeah, because that's the same. The mother is also narcissistic and exploiting the narcissist.
You are doing a lot of diagnosing. A lot.
I actually suggest that you encourage this dynamic. Let them kill each other. Get rid of both of them.
So she's narcissistic, he's narcissistic, they're communicating, that communication is causing you pain.
No. She's manipulating the narcissist for her own means, but she's also being the abusive one. The narcissist is still trying to get validation of her, and she is.
You're giving me a nosebleed. Go on. What was the question?
So how can you get the narcissist to see that he's being manipulated? Because everything that you've probably got talked about today, the narcissist mother knows how to use on his son, which is causing him quite a lot of frustration.
How can you show a narcissist that he's being manipulated by his mum?
Basically.
It's an academic opening. Yeah. Classic academic opening. Narcissists, narcissists can be easily manipulated, as Richard said, they're gullible, and so on and so forth. But I suggest strongly to distinguish between two types of manipulators when we come to narcissists. Manipulators who capitalize on the narcissist's grandiosity, his belief that he is superior, his knowledge is unparalleled, his access to information is unequaled, his judgment is unquestionable, etc. So, smooth operators, mainly psychopaths, would feed off the grandiosity of the narcissist. Would offer him a pie in the sky for $10,000, and he would say, "Pie, yeah, I'm an expert on pies. I'm an expert on the sky. You don't have to tell me anything. I know. I heard of it before. etc." So capitalizing on the grandiosity. But when the narcissist is abused by what is called in object theory, object relations theory, objects, like primary objects, mother, that's an entirely different story. That's actually not manipulation. That's a symbiotic relationship where the primary object, caregiver, could be mother, could be father, if he was raised by grandparents, could be even role models, like teachers, or even peers, by the way. So when narcissist allows himself to be manipulated by, so-called manipulated by these people, actually he's striking a deal. They satisfy important emotional and other needs of the narcissist. Your chances to break this symbiosis are extremely close to zero. You can, of course, in the first type of manipulation, you can leverage the narcissist's paranoia to convince him that he had discovered how he is being manipulated. Yes? Notice the sequence. Yes? So you can hint that something's wrong, and then he will discover that he's actually being manipulated by some unscrupulous scammer. That is possible, absolutely possible. But it is not possible to show the narcissist that he's being manipulated by his mother, because he's not. He's not being manipulated. They are acting as, if you want the technical terms, they are acting as a fusion or a merger dyad. This is jargon of codependency, the jargon of codependency. So they are forming a dyad where there are all kinds of emotional exchanges and so on that are utterly undisruptible. Is that the word?
Undisruptible. It is now.
It's an ancient word I just coined. So undisruptible. So that's the short and the long of it. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Can you just clarify the difference between overt and covert narcissism, how it's formed, and I know. Sorry.
That's my favourite question.
The internal workings and how to deal with each. Are they different to deal with? How do you manipulate,
Well, I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos about this, so I'm a fucking expert. Covert narcissist, it means they're sneaky and they're covert and you'll never see them coming.
It's not. That's why I'm asking.
I think it's one of the, I don't know, is it a problem of language? Is it a problem of psychology's use of language? There can be an overlap between going, it's called a nominalization. So you turn a thing that is a phenomena and you make it a thing. You thingify it. Probably what's happening between those two states is a question of strategy and ability. Before I said I want you to all focus on overt power, whether you have overt power or not in the world, whether you do, whether they do. What are the boundaries of your overt power? If you're a codependent, you'll feel like you're peeping through somebody's window at them naked, because we're trained not to do that. It's a boundary break. But for a psychopath, this is absolutely standard, and a narcissist would bother to do this because it means they can figure out where to get the supply from. We've hammered this, right? For psychopaths, it's power, it's what they want, it's goal-orientated. For narcissists, it's supply. Everything is about supply. So, on this question, are they, you could even say, one's dead good at getting supply, and the other one's shite. That's really it. I mean, so originally it's just the older term for it that I would prefer we went back to would be fragile or vulnerable narcissist, only because it gives us more of a warning of what we can expect. So the person seems to be ostentatiously vulnerable, fragile, shy, withdrawing, and you go, oh, they're not a narcissist, because I looked on a YouTube video and it said that a narcissist is basically Patrick Bateman riding around in a red sports car, shagging everyone, and this person's really quiet and shy and humble. Which is worse? Well, one you can see coming, and the other one you can't see coming, lol. So, you want I think I would prefer the one that I can see, that you don't want to find out later that it's actually a fragile narcissist. So my little formula, because I like to break things down and make them simple, is if they're really good at getting supply, then that's what we would class it. It's a classic narcissist. We should just do away with overt and covert, because I think it's confusing. Classic, grandiose narcissist. If they suck at getting supply, then you're more of a fragile or shy narcissist. If you think you're amazing and you're worthy of special adulation, then and the world agrees with you, then you are in a classic interrelationship with the world. So your strategy can afford to be grandiose, classic, overt. But if you think you're amazing and the world doesn't agree with you, you're going to have to be a sneaky little person, so you're a shy or fragile narcissist. So the classic grandiose is beautiful, is powerful, is a genius, and that's what gathers them supply. The shy or fragile, or vulnerable, they wish they were, and they're not. So they've got to sneak. They become admissions tutors. They become casting agents. This is my own pet theory. I think you'll find them as gatekeepers. I'm not beautiful and amazing, but if you want to get access to this, it's through me. So only but through me can you get there. So
Interesting.
I think it's a strategy issue.
Interesting. I never heard this before.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Teacher, notice me. Do you want to follow up on that?
No, I just advise you to read the description by Akhtar and Cooper. Akhtar and Cooper in 1989 published the best ever description analysis of covert narcissists. I summed it up in a table. I put it in a table on my website, and the chapter on inverted narcissists. So if you go to my website and you look for inverted narcissists, in that chapter there is a table which summarizes Akhtar and Cooper's work 1989. That's by far the most authoritative work on covert narcissism. That's what they teach in university. That's what I teach in university. I don't teach YouTube videos, yes? Sorry? No, Richard is actually, I mean, he did, I think, 2 or 3 videos on covert narcissists, and they are all perfectly accurate. So I know he did his homework. I rewarded him. He got his mark. But then he brought a note from his parents that he's sick and cannot come to school. So we'll see what to do about this. Cooper and Akhtar, Akhtar, 1989. Best by far, and only academically accepted text. Available on my website. I don't want to go into it too much because, frankly, if you look at Richard's videos on covert narcissists, I made 1 or 2. And there's a guy called Vital Minds.
Said.
He made 1 or 2 which are on covert narcissists, which are good, although lately he's making videos about empaths, and I deleted him from my list of credible resources. But because he discovered probably the money in narcissism. But in his early work, his videos on covert narcissists are also very good. These are the 3 sources I would use.
This gentleman hasn't actually asked. Calm down, Teddy.
How can you figure out the goal of a psychopath if they target you?
The what of what?
How do you figure out the goal of a psychopath?
How do I figure out the goal of a psychopath? He tells you. I want your money. I want to fuck you. I want power. What do you mean? He tells you.
When the gun's pointing at you and the demand is made.
Yeah. You can ignore the gun, but the demand gives you an indication of
They love to hide everything, and they'll tell you, like, I need to hide shit.
No, they don't hide what they're looking for. They hide their methods, they hide their existence, they hide the means. Yeah. But they're very clear about what they're looking for.
And if they use gaslighting, love bombing, and all those techniques,
love bombing is not a psychopathic technique. Neither is gaslighting. Again, it's conflating narcissists and psychopaths. Psychopaths are criminals in one shape or another. Even if a psychopath is a president of the United States, or if he's a chief executive officer or whatever, he would tend to think how to circumvent laws, how to leverage them, how to ignore them, how to skirt the line. He would tend to be very creative as to what can and cannot be done by way of interpreting social mores, social conventions, proper legislation, rules. He would hate authority. All this has nothing to do with narcissism. He doesn't love bomb. Why would he love bomb? He doesn't gaslight. He doesn't need to gaslight. He wants money. He wants to steal all the pensions of old ladies. So he would set up a fake company, and he would go to old ladies and he would steal their money. Of course, he would not publish the fact that he's stealing money from old ladies in the New York Times. So he doesn't want to hog the limelight. Nor does he need the old ladies to tell him that he's handsome or that he's a genius. He just wants the money. Nor is he going to love bomb the old ladies or gaslight them. If they don't pay him, probably he will bomb them, but not love bomb them.
Mine, sorry, just going to add on mine. When it said that she liked getting in people's heads, it was a drug. She was obsessed with that.
What was it? The psychopath or narcissist that he's dealing with has actually said, I love getting inside of people's heads and manipulating them.
Yeah, she said it's her drug. So, I mean, is she more of a psychopath or a narcissist? And why would someone declare they're a psychopath early on in a relationship? Is that to, I don't know, is that a lie? Is it
I don't know, is she qualified to diagnose people?
Yeah, she's diagnosed.
She's diagnosed as what? Antisocial? Antisocial personality disorder?
Yeah, but I don't know if that's true. I haven't seen the papers.
Well, first of all, your diagnosis can be, under certain circumstances, a source of leverage. For example, it can intimidate. If you're a narcissistic psychopath, it can garner your narcissistic supply. For example, you can create the fake impression that you're honest, and later on use it. All these grandiose claims, I like to enter people's minds and so on and so forth, it's to create an impact, an impression. I don't know what she wants from you, but if she's a psychopath and she's with you, she wants something. You will discover, trust me, in due time.
Is this a familial relationship or a romantic relationship that you're talking about now?
Romantic,
how romantic psychopaths can be, but it was an ex.
It was an
romantic,
ex.
probably, yeah.
And I'm in like therapy, so I'm going no contact, but like I think she's still like, kind of trying to hoover me.
Well, one way of knowing what they want, seeing as that's what you're focused on, is to look at what did she get. So if she created chaos, confusion, and heartache in you, that's what she wanted. You can retroactively, you can reverse engineer from what you observed and from what you're now experiencing. Probably if this is what you're experiencing, this is what she wanted. She's very significant to you now because you're in therapy over her.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what she wanted.
Yeah.
Is this. You being in this seminar now. But she didn't want you chatting to us and you getting over it. So we'll give her something else.
How old is she?
She's 22. She's like...
22?
22.
I would very, very powerfully doubt a diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder at this age.
She was in the trauma... Apparently, she was in a traumatic event at 3. Her mom tried to kill herself and her. She got into therapy. She got diagnosed at 6.
At 6?
Yeah.
It's not possible to diagnose psychopathy at 6. I think you're confusing a lot of things.
No,
First of all, psychopaths never try to commit suicide.
No, my mom tried to commit suicide and then tried to kill her.
And psychopaths are not influenced by trauma. It's not a trauma-related thing. And they definitely cannot be diagnosed at 6. And very difficult to diagnose at 22 even, or 20. Psychopathy is a lifelong thing that matures, like good wine, you know. It would require also some serious criminal activity, usually, for a diagnostician to decide that it's real antisocial personality disorder, must be an antisocial component. So, lots of people, by the way, how do you know she's diagnosed?
I don't, I'm just saying what she
She
told
said
me.
it.
She said it, exactly, I have no proof.
It's exactly PCL, self-reporting. I take it with a grain of salt,
Oh yeah, trust me, I think.
or with a mountain of
But I
salt.
felt a lot of like lack of accountability and empathy, lack of empathy, and it's kind of...
She may be narcissistic.
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe a narcissist.
Yeah, probably.
She may be even, there's a rare personality disorder called schizotypal.
Yeah.
Schizotypal.
She has like had like crazy trips in her own head.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That's schizotypal.
Yeah.
Schizotypal personality disorder is someone who believes she can read minds and she can manipulate people from a distance and all this kind of bullshit. And I'm talking about Donald Trump. And so very often schizotypal types are comorbid with narcissism because they believe they have special powers or special abilities and so on, and so it's kind of narcissistic. The background you describe is rarely the typical background for a proper psychopath. Definitely no such diagnosis can be made for sure at the age of 20 or 6, I mean forget 6. No, at the age of 6 we have something else. It's called conduct disorder. Conduct disorder is a precursor. People with conduct disorder, they're diagnosed at age 6 or between ages 6 and 16. People with conduct disorder have a much higher chance of developing antisocial personality disorder after age 25, more or less. But we don't begin to take seriously antisocial personality disorder diagnosis before the age of 25. Recently, adolescence has been defined as 15 to 25. So today when we make academic studies, we would define adolescents between 15 and 25. Twenge, for example, all her latest research is 15 to 25. So we don't diagnose this kind of conditions in adolescents. Narcissism also is not diagnosed in adolescents.
Is emotional sadism associated with narcissism?
She derives a sense of power from her ability to inflict pain.
And another odd question, last one. Hypersexuality, is that with narcissism?
Sorry?
Hypersexuality.
Hypersexuality? Some not. If she's somatic, yes. But probably, I don't know how seductive she is, flirtatious, emotionally dramatic. Because these are hallmarks of histrionic personality disorder.
Yeah.
So, but histrionics actually don't like sex. It's not about sex. Their hypersexuality is about control. So they would be cock teasers, or they would use sex to obtain a sense of power. It's all about power. But they can be very hypersexual. But hypersexual in order to reassert their power.
Yeah, that makes
their control.
sense.
Sorry?
That makes sense, yeah, what you said. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'd like to go back to the multiple personality disorder that you mentioned.
I wouldn't.
I'm going to ask anyway. You talked about the comorbidity between NPD and ASPD. What I've actually seen is something similar of two disorders, comorbid, that showed the multiple personality.
I'm terribly sorry. I apologize to all of you. I have a hearing impairment from the war, so you would need to speak up.
Okay. What I'm interested in is the comorbidity that you talked about in NPD and ASPD, and the way the two clash. I've seen something similar in somebody who I believe is NPD and Asperger's comorbid. So I'd just be interested in whether you've got any experience of that, whether the two can actually go together, how it would manifest.
Which?
NPD and Asperger's.
And Asperger's. That would be a bit of a problem because Asperger's is no longer a diagnosis. It's been removed from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, edition 5. It's now part of autism spectrum disorder, but not as Asperger's. The whole clinical setup of Asperger's has been dismantled. Perhaps because it was invented by a Nazi doctor. But instead of us, it's true, by the way, in Austria, Vienna. Instead of his name was shockingly Asperger. Instead we have autism spectrum disorder. Now autism.
Still diagnosed Asperger's separately.
Asperger's is no longer diagnosed on the DSM-5. You must have, the diagnosis is autism spectrum disorder with emphasis, or with access.
I'm talking about was diagnosed only 9 months ago with Asperger's.
Then the clinician who diagnosed him is, how to put it gently, ignorant. Okay. But autism, more to the point. I think I have a conversation with Richard about this. I have videos. I wrote the first article comparing the two 20 years ago.
I'm not interested in the difference. I'm interested in the comorbidity and the issues that
comorbidity between the two. There are no statistics about this. There are no statistics for the simple reason that they are often misdiagnosed as one or the other. I mean, narcissism could be very often is misdiagnosed as autism, and then it's settled. We don't need to test for anything else. Or autism is diagnosed as narcissism, and then it's settled, and we don't test for anything else. Extremely rarely, I actually never came across a case where someone said, wait a minute, let me test for autism, let me test for narcissism, and see which is which. Intellectual laziness. Once you settle on a diagnosis, you become emotionally invested in your diagnosis, and you don't want to go any further. So there are, regrettably, no statistics. However, I sometimes think that one could lead to the other. A child with autism, I think, could develop narcissism as a defense. And so I think autism can lead to narcissism, and then they could be comorbid. But they share so many superficial aspects, like problem with social cues, and so on, ritualistic behavior, empathy.
Well, that's what I was thinking. What you described earlier was effectively somebody with high functioning autism.
What did I describe?
Sensory issues.
What did you describe right now?
What you described as the narcissist earlier was effectively high functioning autism.
This is very common. This is very common error of misdiagnosing one as the other. But autism has many distinct features that don't exist in narcissism. So it's, if you know what you're doing, you will never diagnose one as the other. But very few know what they're doing, because narcissism, modern knowledge of narcissism is very rare. Very few diagnosticians, mental health practitioners know what they're doing with regards to narcissism. Autism is better known, autism, but narcissism is new. It's new, so they don't know exactly how to diagnose.
The way you say narcissism and Nazism sometimes is exactly the same.
Yes, narcissism is new, and it's very easy to confuse with.
Turn the cameras off!
Cannot help it.
It won't go down! Next question. Heil.
The folk salute you.
Hi there. I just wanted to, I mean, it's a little bit of an obscure question, but Richard, in one of his YouTube
That's obscure.
videos, mentioned the relation between fundamentalist fundamentalist religious upbringings and problems later on. I don't know, I can't remember whether it was the codependent or whether it was the narcissistic behaviours, but is that something that you have elaborated on that I could look at?
We, this week, have been talking about religion and talking about God. I'm trying to remember where my head was at that time, because I did have a strong opinion at the time that I made that video, and I don't know. But I think it's very obscure. You can draw a correlation. There are many correlations. You know, if I'm raised in a religiously fundamentalist house, that in itself will be traumatic and will involve me modeling infantile defenses to reality, and I will be told, don't see reality as it is. You have a sexual impulse, repress it. You have a thought, don't think it. Your father is this, don't think anything less than that. Or you're going to live forever, You know, the idea that, that you're special, you're chosen. Yeah, what a fucking nightmare. The idea that you're special, you're chosen people, that you're oppressed. These are highly narcissistic narratives that then, if it's delivered with the stick of fundamentalism, particularly, is non-nuanced. That's what makes it fundamentalist. This is it. The book is written. No more debate can be held. It's absolutism. It's totalitarian. And I think that you could also draw a correlate between people who are raised in totalitarian states. They also develop NPD, or become maybe not NPD, but they become very narcissistic in their relationship to the world.
Also be the codependent as well, if they were brought up like that, as well as the narcissist.
Oh, you wish to conflate and make the codependent different as a narcissist, but they are not. Narcissism, if we stray from the Alcoholics Anonymous version of codependency and we say, okay, codependency is a fawning response in which your sense of self is derived only from other people, that's what a narcissist is. So we do have this false, and I have furthered that myth and then tried to stop it, but I know that people like simple solutions. This, that, here, there, and they create this cosmology, but actually NPD is a CPTSD response. NPD is a fawning response. They are narcissistic personality disorder. I would say they are people pleasers because they need to, nothing matters but supply. So I must be funny, be charming, be sexy, be something to get my supply. So of course, I also, just like you, my friend, if I'm the narcissist and you're my codependent ally, we're both hypervigilant to what other people are focused on, how we look, how they look. It's a very image-focused thing. So yeah, the codependency thing, in this context of a family that is a fundamentalist religious family, they're not second cousins, they're brother and sister. They're right there, right next to each other. One has chosen to be neurotically predatory. The other one has chosen to be neurotically prey. So sometimes, I had a dog. I was fostered a dog once who had been traumatized, and he manifested this DID split,
Was it traumatized because you adopted it?
No.
No. Just making sure.
Very aggressive, very submissive, and he didn't have any in-between state. Externally, outside the house, he was very aggressive with other dogs, and then inside the house, if I said, don't do that, at literally that tone of voice, bearing in mind this is a pit bull mixed with a ridgeback, a lion bear killer. Very, very powerful. I had to give him back. I couldn't control him. He would fall on his back, show me his throat, and then urinate in terror. Just from this, stop it. He took me as the alpha male, and if the alpha male said anything, so he had no balance point. He split. Why? Because of the trauma of whatever he went through before he ever came to me. So the codependent response, codependent in inverted commas, comes from the same environment as the narcissistic response. So yes, fundamentalist religiosity definitely can breed it.
I used to do this with my first wife.
Turner.
With the urinating.
The urinating? She would urinate?
No, I was doing it. But
who shut the throat?
Throat, everything. Didn't work. We divorced.
You do? Terry, can you come all the way down here, please, mate? Yeah.
Do you know how much we paid her to ask the question?
Just touching on the close relationship between the narcissist and the codependent and cold therapy. Would cold therapy be of any benefit to a codependent?
No.
No.
No, because it entails extreme re-traumatization. And while I agree with Richard, the etiology of narcissism, the initial development of narcissism and codependency is similar or even identical. Same set of parents can produce a narcissistic child and a codependent child in the same family. These are different solutions to identical situations, abuse, and so on. Still, codependency is sufficiently different to narcissism in a way that re-traumatization probably will lead to suicide. There will be no way to prevent this. The codependency revolves in big part around abandonment issues. Narcissists have abandonment, anxiety, separation anxiety, but it's definitely not the core and not the main thing. Codependency is the main thing. Very similar to borderline. For example, cold therapy with borderline, no borderline. I mean, you start with cold therapy in borderline, you end up with cold therapy. No borderline. She will commit suicide. Because of abandonment anxiety. And the first thing the therapist does in cold therapy is abandon. He encourages transference as a sadistic parent, so that the patient begins to see him as a sadistic parent. And one of the next phases is abandonment. Abrupt, very cruel abandonment. Narcissists can stand this particular aspect, narcissists can stand. But codependent and borderline will not stand. Absolutely, but they will not survive this.
Codependence to me, narcissists this way. They split right here. A Schrodinger's cat.
For example, I can move. I have no abandonment issues. But look at Richard. He's sweating, collapsing. I
mean, I think we're coming down to our last couple of questions that we can get to. Anybody else got any questions? Yes, sir.
Can a codependent have sociopathic traits, and if so, how would one know?
Sociopathic traits?
Yeah.
There essentially is no such thing. What you call sociopathy, which many mental health practitioners are using, is not any kind of mental health diagnosis. It's a label invented originally by the media to describe people who are averse to society, its rules, authority, make their own rules as they go along, obey their own internal codes, gang up together on others. I mean, this kind of thing. So it's nothing to do with mental health. It's a social choice, social preference, or if you are very conformist, it's social deviance, if you want to. I mean, if you insist on what's right, what's wrong. So sociopathy is a kind of social deviance, But, of course, there have been numerous periods in human history where what people call sociopathy would have been the bon ton, the right thing to do. If you hadn't been a sociopath, that would have indicated problems with your mental health. And sociopathy has been an adaptive strategy, a good adaptation. So that's why I'm saying it's not a clinical entity. It depends critically on period in history, on place, I mean, for example, take Nazi Germany. If you were helping the Jews, if you were helping Jews, hiding Jews in Nazi Germany, you would be bloody suicidal. Not only were bloody suicidal, something was wrong with you. Because the overwhelming majority of Germans did not think you should help Jews. They thought you should burn them, among other things. So, within that society, your sociopathy was the norm. It was normative and was rewarded. If you were a sociopath, you ended up in the SS. When you ended up in the SS, you became rich, powerful, and so on. If you were not a sociopath, you ended up in Dachau, and then in this or that chimney. So clearly, to have been a helpful, empathic person in Nazi Germany was a bad, maladaptive strategy, while being a sociopath was an adaptive strategy. In July 2016, the, I think, British magazine, New Scientist, one of the two most important scientific magazines in the world, July 2016, for those of you who want to look it up, came up with a cover story. The cover story was, parents, teach your children to be narcissists. Because narcissism is fast becoming positive adaptation. In our world, it begins to be a good idea to be a narcissist. You get ahead, make money, you become president. I mean, good things are happening to you when you're a narcissist. And so there are scholars, not a few, Maccabee, Kevin Dutton, James Fallon, I mean, you can continue. There are scholars who say that narcissism today is a positive adaptation, and that in certain professions, psychopathy is a totally positive adaptation, and therefore, in these professions, we should select for psychopaths. For example, Kevin Dutton says that all political leaders should be psychopaths. Should be psychopaths, because psychopathy gives them advantage. For example, they can easily sacrifice the life of 10,000 people without thinking twice for the greater good. All this shows me that these so-called mental health diagnoses are not clinical entities. Clinical entity is invariable. Invariable in ancient China, in ancient Egypt, in Nazi Germany, in modern day France, in the French Revolution, in the Russian Revolution, in Israel, in Egypt, in America. Clinical entity is a clinical entity. Tuberculosis, malaria are the same, period. They don't depend on time. They don't time in history, they don't depend on location, they don't depend on anything. They're clinical entity. Not so narcissism, not so psychopathy. In the Bible, the Hebrews, as they cross into Canaan, as they finish the 40 years in the desert, probably they're very, very pissed off. So they are instructed by God to kill all the nations, all the ethnicities in Canaan, 7 of them, and to make sure that they kill all the children as well. It's in the Bible. Bible? The book of morality. Wouldn't you call this behavior psychopathic? Today, Moses would be a war criminal, indicted by The Hague and put in jail, in prison for the rest of his life. And Joshua, his second in command, his lieutenant. These people killed, according to the Bible, several 100,000 people, men, women, and children, and then the animals as well, by God's instruction. So psychopathy is contextual. It's not something, and therefore I doubt very much that it qualifies to be diagnosis.
I know that you two had a question, but you said you felt a bit shy. Was it? It was to do with institutions, right? Go on. Yeah.
Yeah, it was about therapists and support workers and people of that nature.
Yeah.
Because I'm noticing after 15 years of dealing with people like this that there's quite a lot of concerning behaviour that might indicate narcissism or something else.
Yep.
amongst them, and I'm wondering, are there any strategies that I can use to try and deal with these people, because I can't seem to manage to avoid them.
Okay.
So,
therapists who are narcissists, have you ever heard of such an that they want control and intimate access to other human it's a field that, yes, will attract narcissistic types. So in order to get what you want, then yes, you may find yourself in a position where you have to leverage, negotiate, bargain with, and manipulate narcissistic or even psychopathic types. I know that you said in certain roles, like surgery, you'll find a lot of psychopaths, yeah. And that, you know, as Sam just said,
there are some narcissists among politicians.
Hmm?
There are some narcissists among politicians, for example.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh. Shocking, I know. Recent discovery.
Recent discovery. So yeah, you could very well be sort of making your way through a cluster B minefield in some of these areas. Don't be shocked. You know, that you should consider that probably to be the norm rather than not. I mean, if you take the shock out of it and you know that that's what you're going to get, then a lot of the upset and the emotional drainingness of it will be set to one side. Is there anything you'd add to that?
Well, Richard, we've written so extensively on how to cope with narcissists. If you think they're narcissists, I mean, just go to the literature, go to the I don't think it's a lot of value added in recapping that. I just advise you to be a bit cautious in diagnosing people, if you're not qualified to do so. Many people are narcissistic, doesn't make them narcissists. Many people are worn out, simply. Some professions, like policemen, they're worn out. It's tiring, it's exhausting. And so this provokes narcissistic defenses. When we're very tired and so on, we have narcissistic defenses. We become much more self-centered, much less empathic, much more aggressive. So a lot of so-called narcissistic behavior is the outcome of the conditions of work. And so policemen, for example, are very narcissistic. But not all of them are narcissists.
yes, but a lot of this behaviour included gaslighting, quite a lot of gaslighting.
I haven't come yet across therapists who gaslight, although I must admit it's an interesting therapeutic technique, which I'm grateful to you for raising the possibility. I simply encourage you to perhaps be a bit more lenient, a bit more forgiving. People engage in narcissistic behaviors and defenses when they find things intolerable. Conditions of work, hours of work, pay, the constant touch with customers and people. Being in touch with people is tiring, exhausting, eroding. We need our narcissistic defenses. When we're in touch with people, we very often create narcissistic firewalls and perimeters. Otherwise, we'll disintegrate. So, in many professions, and this goes, for example, for show business. Show business, you can say, well, people in show business, they don't get in touch with so many people. It's not true. Through fans and so on. They're exposed to millions of people. People tax. It's difficult to work with people and to be with people. They are, if you don't set firm boundaries and then vigilantly maintain them aggressively and so on, they will eat you alive. They will devour you. So in many of these professions, there is pronounced narcissism that has absolutely nothing to do with pathological narcissism, because we tend very often to confuse many things. Theodore Millen and Roger Davis wrote a magnificent book in the year 2000. I mean, the second edition, I think, came out in 2000, and there were others. It's called Personality Disorders in Modern Life. Wonderful book. And Theodore Millen says there, people are confusing narcissistic style, narcissistic personality, with narcissistic defenses, with narcissistic behaviors, with healthy narcissism, with narcissistic traits. Bloody hell. I mean, narcissism is everywhere. We all have healthy narcissism. We all have defenses. They're activated very often. So it's very easy to go around and say, yeah, narcissism. Narcissism is a clinical entity. Something like 1% of the general population actually have been diagnosed with narcissism. And even if it is an underestimate, so 3%. But if you listen to people, especially in forums and seminars like this, Every second person is a narcissist. Every second person, or in some cases everyone. And that cannot be true. It's not true clinically, you know. So I think we should be somewhat more forgiving. We have entered an age of utter intolerance towards each other. Utter intolerance. We can't stand each other anymore. There's too many of us to start with, 7.6 billion. Too many of us. Why do you think this anti-immigration sentiment? Because 70 million, 69 million immigrants flooded the lands of the earth. And we can't stand each other anymore. We can't stand each other in marriages, we can't stand each other in politics, can't stand each other in, we can't stand each other simply. So the incidence or frequency of narcissistic defenses is much, much, much higher than 20 years ago. Much, much higher. So it's very easy to to make a mistake. And so everyone became narcissistic and so on and so forth. We haven't been taught, or we have lost, the basic skills of living together, coexisting, tolerating, listening, offering empathy, and so on. And this coming from a psychopathic narcissist.
Sam Vaknin is preaching love and tolerance.
because it pays. Because it pays. Don't get me wrong. Yeah.
Ladies, gents, we're going to wrap the seminar there. Could you please help me by putting all your stuff and junk that you don't want into the bins? That would be awesome. Thank you very much for coming today. Thank you very much, Sam, and to Lee and Stephen, for helping out.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.